Whoosh! Whoosh! Xianxia's entire body was enveloped by an extremely scorching and blazing airflow, whereas the surroundings of the golden core within his dantian was surging and coiled with translucent tribulation flames. Wind and fire howled while his golden core emitted an extremely dazzling and brilliant glow, and it even faintly showed signs of melting. The dark clouds in the sky above him roiled as crimson-red bolts of lightning danced about violently, and the golden core within his body was blazing with flames as if it was being incinerated. All of these were signs that both rebirth tribulations were about to arrive. If it was said that the advancement into the golden core realm allowed cultivators to possess the roots of the heavens and the earth, and ceased floating indeterminately on the path to the Tao, then experiencing the rebirth tribulation was an advancement of the essence of a cultivator's life, and it allowed a cultivator's soul to transform and condense a soul core. So long as the soul core remained intact, the cultivator's life would never fade away, and even if the cultivator's body was destroyed, the body of another could be seized to achieve rebirth. But overcoming the dual rebirth tribulations wasn't an easy thing. Conversely, the rebirth tribulations were extremely dangerous, and the slightest carelessness would possibly cause one's Tao foundation and soul to be incinerated by the tribulation flames, while one's body would be struck apart by the tribulation lightning, causing it to be extremely dangerous. Simply speaking, when one tried to overcome the rebirth tribulation, one would either be reborn and undergo a transformation or be obliterated directly and perish completely. There wasn't a third choice. Xianxia naturally understood the various dangers when overcoming the rebirth tribulation. But he couldn't care about all this at this moment, because the siege of the numerous experts had already covered the heavens and the earth and struck towards him. Rumble, martial techniques, magic treasures, and divine abilities that were like a tempestuous storm traversed the sky and interweaved together into a dense net of light that poured down towards Xianxia. This strike gathered the terrifying strength of a few tens of genius experts, and it wasn't inferior to the vast scene of 10,000 arrows being released in unison. It was sufficient to destroy a city or stronghold, crush a mountain or river, and its impetus was terrifying to the extreme. Break apart! Xianxia's entire body was burning as his being was like a furnace that was blazing extremely exuberantly, and the flaming peacock fan in his hand swept out to explode out with flames that shot into the sky. He possessed an imposing aura as if he was able to slaughter a great number while facing a powerful army, and his killing intent charged into the sky. He'd already made up his mind that he would overcome the tribulation while slaughtering, so how could he be thrown into disorder by this and cower? Slaughter was rebirth, and so long as the tribulation didn't end, neither would the slaughter. Bang! 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 Numerous magic treasures exploded in midair and transformed into powder as various martial techniques and divine abilities were drowned by the sea of lava before being easily destroyed. This scene was slightly terrifying, as all those magic treasures were top-grade heaven-rank magic treasures, whereas all those martial techniques and divine abilities were of the perfect level. Otherwise, how could it possess the might to destroy a city or stronghold and crush a mountain or river? Yet now, everything was obstructed and was shattered into powder and incinerated into nothingness by the monstrous sea of lava. All the experts in the distance revealed shocked expressions. Xianxia is really shocking. Even if he's facing the dual tribulations of rebirth, he's still able to explode out with such a terrifying might. If he's able to successfully overcome the tribulation, then exactly how terrifying would his strength become? We absolutely can't allow him to succeed. Peiyu cried out loudly and seemed to be in a state of madness. He'd already wasted a heavenly immortal's decree, yet was still unable to annihilate Xianxia. If Xianxia was allowed to successfully overcome the tribulation, then their lives would probably be accompanied by nightmares forever. He would absolutely not allow that situation to occur, nor could he accept such a situation occurring, as just thinking about it caused him to feel terrified. Bang! An enormous mountain was pulled out of the ground and flew towards Xianxia before crushing down upon him. This was a seal, the quasi-immortal artifact of Qianshao, and it was called Mountain Form Seal. At this moment, the seal had formed into a mountain that surged with talisman markings while rosy clouds rose from it. There were luxuriant ancient trees and enormous vines standing tall on it, and there were even various beasts flying and moving about on it. It was filled with vitality and vividly revealed the vast aura that belonged to a quasi-immortal artifact. This enormous seal smashed down while filled with vitality, causing it to seem like a true mountain world smashing down, and it emitted a terrifying aura and a myriad of auspicious rays of light as it moved to crush Xianxia. Obviously, Xianxia had perceived as well that if they didn't annihilate Xianxia now, they wouldn't have another chance in the future. So he didn't hesitate in the slightest to utilize his quasi-immortal artifact, the mountain form seal, with the hope of completely stopping Xianxia's footsteps that moved towards the rebirth realm. Break apart. Xianxia's gaze were like bolts of lightning as he roared loudly, and the jet-black hair that covered his head stood on end as the vital energy in his entire body surged, causing him to emit a majestic and powerful imposing aura and the spirit of looking down on all beings in the world. Bang! An expanse of a surging sea of flames appeared and fiercely swept into the sky, and then it collided with the mountain. The mountains and rocks transformed into powder as the ancient trees turned to ash, and everything exploded apart. The flaming peacock fan was a quasi-immortal artifact as well. When utilized in the hands of Xianxia, the might it revealed was countless times stronger than when it was utilized by Xianxia, and it directly blasted Xianxiao's mountain form seal flying. Moreover, the surface of the mountain form seal became dim and lusterless, and it simply seemed too weak to go against Xianxia. Everyone was extremely shocked. These two quasi-immortal artifacts collided with each other. Yet Xianxia obviously seems to have fallen into a disadvantaged position, and it's even to the extent then he isn't able to go against a single move of Xianxia's. Xianxia was just about to seize this opportunity to charge and slaughter when he suddenly sensed that something was off. The golden core in his body emitted crackling sounds as it shook violently, and it was actually burned by the tribulation flames to the point it was on the verge of transforming into liquid and evaporating. He originally intended to wait for when both the rebirth tribulations descended to rely on the energy of slaughter to resist the tribulation flames. However, the tribulation lightning in the sky hadn't descended. Yet the tribulation flames here had suddenly become violent instead. This suddenly change of events forced him to have no choice but to divert his attention and suppress the tribulation flames within his entire strength. So everyone saw a strange scene. Xianxia's body was raging with tribulation flames, yet the sky above him was covered in dark clouds that surged with crimson bolts of lightning, but not a strand of tribulation lightning descended. How strange! Look, the tribulation lightning Xianxia drew over has actually formed into an army of lightning weapons, and it has transformed into lightning pikes, lightning swords, lightning spears, lightning halberds. My God! Can't be, right? I heard that the stronger one's strength was when overcoming the tribulation, the more terrifying the tribulation lightning one would encounter. This tribulation lightning this fellow drew out has actually transformed into various lightning weapons. Doesn't this mean that this fellow's strength is already strong to the point of being capable of looking down on everyone? Otherwise, how could he possibly give rise to such a terrifying tribulation lightning? Indeed, the tribulation lightning is capable of sensing the strength of a cultivator before sending down a tribulation lightning that's sufficient to kill the cultivator. Now, this tribulation lightning is so vast, and it's obviously because Xianxia's strength is too formidable and caused such a shocking change to occur in it. The hearts of all the spectators in the distance shuddered when they saw this time, and then they moved back. Most of them were about to advance to the rebirth realm, and they were deeply afraid that the aura of Xianxia's tribulation would affect their own, as they'd be helpless once their own tribulations were drawn over. Quickly! Attack him with all your might! The tribulation flames have already started to incinerate his golden core, so we'll seize this opportunity to reap his life. The group of people shouted out furiously as they went all out and risked their lives against Xianxia. Bang! The flaming peacock fan danced about violently as a surging sea of flames swept out, causing a few people to be immediately enveloped by the sea of flames and explode into blood and pieces of bones before being completely burned into ash. Even though he was in extreme danger from both inside and out, Xianxia's attacks still remained ruthless and decisive like an azura that swept through the world, and he bathed in the blood of his enemies as he moved forward, and no one was capable of stopping his footsteps. At this moment, The tribulation clouds in the sky grew more and more numerous. The crimson lightning roared as lightning surged and became clearer and clearer, and it was like a treasured sword was hovering above his head. Even though it hadn't descended for a long time, the destructive force emitted by it that intended to annihilate everything was sufficient to collapse one's fighting spirit and cause the guard around one's mind to crumble. Xianxia was naturally affected, as well as the aura of danger he perceived grew thicker and thicker, but he was unrestrained and had placed his entire mind and body into the battle. The tribulation flames burned his body, yet were unable to stop his footsteps. The tribulation lightning floated in the sky, yet was unable to shackle his soul. He seemed to have completely forgotten the existence of both the rebirth tribulations, or perhaps it was precisely because he knew that he was in an extremely dangerous situation that he would act so resolutely. Yes, at this moment, there were numerous enemies besieging him from outside, while the tribulation had descended within his body. If even his heart was in disorder, then how would he survive? He wanted to slaughter out a path of blood, slaughter his way up into the sky, slaughter to the point no one was capable of obstructing him. As for whether he was able to successfully overcome the tribulation or not, that could be decided after the slaughter. Xianxia carried out a slaughter that swept out in all directions while feeling extraordinary pain from the tribulation flames that burned within him. His golden core was about to be destroyed, his Tao foundation about to collapse, yet he seemed as if he didn't notice in the slightest, and his expression was calm and indifferent as before while he stepped forward. Wei Muyun died miserably. Lung Qianxiu died miserably. All the genius experts of the Eastern Summer Dynasty and Skywolf Kingdom that had entered the Isle of Fallen Treasures were annihilated. This was a path of blood where slaughter and tribulation were present together, and it had transformed into the horrifying calamity before their eyes, causing everyone that saw this scene to feel their entire bodies go icy cold as if they'd fallen into an icy pit. He's even unafraid of the tribulation and has even become indifferent to life and death. Is such a person still human? Suddenly, an extremely formidable aura assaulted him from the shadows, and Xianxia slapped out with a flip of his hand and collided with the attack. It was like a volcano had erupted as brilliant lights shot out while rumbling echoed in the sky, and infinite waves of air swept out. What? Someone stopped Xianxia. Everyone in the distance was shocked, and they stared their eyes wide open as they looked over. Instantly, they saw clearly that the person who made a move was shockingly the descendant of the peerless flying beast, Inferno Crane, the Century Pool Dynasties by Lingyun. Presently, she'd already transformed into an Inferno Crane. Her green wings were like glass while her entire body emitted a brilliant and dazzling glow, causing her to seem like a king of flying beasts that wanted to annihilate Xianxia. It's you. Xianxia frowned with indifference. This woman hadn't made a move since the beginning, yet had chosen to make a move at this moment. Obviously, she'd perceived that he was already on the verge of suffering the tribulation, and she intended to complexly exterminate him. Hand over the flaming peacock fan and I'll leave right away. Bai Lingyun's clear eyes were calm as the wings and feathers on her entire body fluttered with a green brilliance, and she revealed an extremely terrifying aura. Taking advantage of the situation? Xianxia sneered and couldn't be bothered to waste his breath on her before turning around and moving to slaughter those at the side. After the battle was carried out up until now, less than 10 people remained in the battlefield. But all of them were extremely formidable. For example, Bai Lingyun, Qin Shao, Peiyu, Weikong, Changfeng, and the various other genius experts that had come from first-rate dynasties, the Darshan and Darqin dynasties. Bang! Suddenly, the sky shook as a figure charged over like a bolt of lightning to block Xianxia's path. And as he charged over, he emitted an extremely fierce aura and monstrous killing intent. Shockingly, it was Qin Shao. He'd suddenly put on a golden battle armor that emitted a brilliant golden radiance that transformed into 9 roaring golden dragons that whistled about around him, causing him to seem like a god that commanded dragons in battle. Bang! Qin Shao and Xianxia collided head-on and instantly caused a terrifying wave of air to erupt and sweep towards the surroundings, causing the heavens to shudder as the earth cracked open. This strike was extremely terrifying and seemed capable of collapsing the heavens and shattering the earth. Everyone in the distance was instantly shocked. Qin Zhao's cultivation seemed to have suddenly risen explosively by a few times, causing him to actually seem on par with Xianxia after their head-on collision, and he didn't seem to fall into a disadvantaged position as he had before. In next to no time, everyone noticed that the explosive increase in Qin Zhao's strength had come from the golden battle armor on him. The armor emitted a brilliant gold light that formed into 9-dragon phantom that was actually like an extremely miraculous blessing that caused his strength to rise explosively. What treasure is this? Everyone exclaimed with admiration. Qin Zhao was worthy of being the proud genius from a first-rate dynasty, as not only did he possess the quasi-immortal artifact, mountain form seal, even the golden battle armor he wore was so formidable, and the resources and reserves he possessed were something that ordinary dynasties were absolutely unable to compare to. Quasi-immortal artifact, golden dragon armor. The Crown Prince has finally utilized this ultimate weapon. The nearby Wei Kong's eyes exploded out with cold lights as he muttered. He was similarly from the Darqin dynasty, so he was naturally clearly aware how formidable the might of the golden dragon armor was. Not only was this battle armor capable of allowing Qin Zhao's strength to rise explosively, as if he possessed the strength of 9 dragons, it was an extremely extraordinary defensive magic treasure. Moreover, it was a quasi-immortal artifact, causing it to be extremely formidable to the point that one could only dream of utilizing an ordinary magic treasure to penetrate its defenses. She glanced coldly and indifferently at Qin Zhao before turning around once more. He knew that if he was locked in combat with Qin Zhao, then he would probably fall into a hopeless situation. At that time, even if they didn't kill him, the descending tribulation lightning in the sky would be sufficient to crush him into powder. Thinking of escaping, dream on. Qin Zhao blocked Xianxi's path, and he held the mountain form seal in his hand before smashing it at Xianxi. Meanwhile, Bai Lingyun had seized this opportunity to charge over as well. She transformed into the form of the peerless flying beast, Inferno Crane. Her single leg emanated blazing rays of light that flickered with talisman markings and emitted the profundities of Grand Daos as it tore through the sky towards him like an attack from a god of devils that intended to claw Xianxi apart. This sort of scene and might that was caused solely by her own strength was similarly terrifying to the extreme. No one can stop me. I'll overcome the rebirth tribulation today, right in front of all of you. Xianxi gritted his teeth as he took the strike head-on, and a surging and blazing wave of flame swept out from the flaming peacock fan to collide with it. Bang! The battle between the three of them shook the heavens and the earth, causing rays of lights to charge out and shake the skies while violent gales blew, and it obliterated the land while crushing space, clearly revealing how terrifying and violent the battle was. There's finally someone who can go against Xianxi. The spectators in the distance heaved a sigh of relief in their hearts when they saw this scene. If Xianxi was allowed to move freely and look down upon everyone, then they would really fear for their ability to accept all this while not being shocked to death. But even then, Xianxi's display was enough to shock them all. He'd gone against 2 top experts by himself while being beneath the threat of the rebirth tribulation, yet was still able to prevent himself from falling into a disadvantaged situation during the battle, and this obviously showed exactly how terrifying his strength was. Swoosh! Suddenly, a figure flashed through the sky while standing on a golden ray of light that pierced through the sky and emitted a dazzling golden brilliance. It was like a god had descended into the violent battle while swinging his sword. Pei Yu, the quasi-immortal artifact, Sky Sorrow Sword. Hasn't this fellow already become extremely weak from expending his blood essence and lifespan as offering to the heavenly immortals' decree? How did he instantly recover to his peak state? Could it be that he consumed some sort of rare spirit pill? As they looked at Pei Yu's figure that raged with sword insight and was in even higher spirits than before while joining the battle with the Sky Sorrow Sword in hand, all the spectators of the battle were shocked in their hearts, and they were unable to wrap their heads around why the extremely weak Pei Yu would be able to suddenly recover to his previous state. Pei Yu's mighty entrance instantly caused Xianxi's situation to become dangerous and turn precarious. Couldn't be helped. The 3 of them could be said to be the 3 most formidable geniuses amongst those who had entered the Isle of Fallen Treasures. One held the mountain form seal while wearing the golden dragon armor, causing him to be powerful and overbearing. The other had transformed into her true form, the peerless flying beast Inferno Crane, and her sole leg was like the hand of a devil god that tore apart the heavens and the earth. The final one amongst the three had recovered his vital energy to his peak state, and he held the Sky Sorrow sword in hand while emanating killing intent that shot into the sky. At this moment, their might when they joined forces was sufficient to easily annihilate a rebirth realm expert. If it was during normal conditions, Xianxia would have the strength to go against them. But at this moment, he was enveloped by the dual tribulations of rebirth, causing him to suffer troubles both internally and externally, and he instantly fell into great danger. Bang! After a life-and-death struggle, Xianxia and Qin Xiao were both blasted flying. A bloody battle like this was extremely dangerous, as martial techniques and magic treasures raged about like torrents while brilliant lights covered the heavens and the earth, and it was an extremely intense scene. A sharp sound tore through the sky, and Bai Lingyun had pounced over right away when she saw Xianxia being blasted flying. The Inferno Crane was a flying beast of ancient times, an existence that had once torn gods apart, according to rumor. As a descendant of such a beast that possessed a pure bloodline, Bai Lingyun's strength was naturally formidable to the extreme. The scales of her sole leg glowed while enshrouded with Tao insights, causing it to be brilliant and glittering. Even a mountain could be easily torn into powder under a single claw of hers, and if Xianxia was clawed by her, he would surely be torn into a pile of flesh on the spot. Bang! In this extremely critical situation, Xianxia counterattacked with his left hand and used his fist to meet the Inferno Crane's exceedingly sharp and enormous claw head-on. The collision of the two instantly emanated boundless blazing rays of light. Moreover, Xianxia was shaken by this strike to the point blood sprayed endlessly out of his mouth, and he'd suffered a heavy injury. Swoosh! The Inferno Crane's gaze was piercingly gold as its green and brilliant wings spun around before it swooped over once more, and it gave rise to a ferocious gale that caused the heavens and the earth to tremble. OM! Numerous dazzling talisman markings flashed into appearance on its body. These talisman markings were the grand Tao brands the peerless flying beast was born with, and it contained supreme profundities that emitted a myriad of brilliant lights as soon as it was executed. The sound of the Tao that seemed like the chanting of gods could be heard faintly, causing the heavens to shake and the world to resonate. After that, this sound started becoming louder to the point of being like ripples that undulated and gushed towards Xianxia. This was the Inferno Crane's innate Tao art, a soundwave attack, and it was capable of heavily injuring the soul up to directly annihilating one's soul. At this moment, this soundwave transformed into a ripple that caused piece after piece of space to explode open the instant it spread out, and numerous mountains transformed into powder successively. A light ripple was capable of causing the heavens and the earth to go dim. Rumble! Xianxia felt apprehensive as his eye of divine truth had noticed danger, and has struck out repeatedly with his left hand to condense countless thunderstorm vortexes that surged out before colliding with the Inferno Crane's soundwave ripples and collapsing along with it. All the spectators were terrified in their hearts. This level of battle simply caused them to feel despair, as it had already attained the limit allowed by the Golden Core realm. How can others be a match for such strength? Just going against it would mean death. Xianxia and Bai Lingyun were locked in battle. Both of them charged up and collided successively with each other before being blasted flying in unison. Moreover, at this moment, Qin Xiao and Pei Yu had charged over once more, and the successive head-on collisions caused Xianxia's injuries to become even more severe. Besides that, there were over 10 crisscrossed cracks that dripped with blood on his body that were the most obvious, and if this continued, he'd probably be directly split apart. The situation was very adverse. Xianxia was completely covered in blood as he fell into a dangerous situation. No matter how formidable he was, he'd suffered heavy and severe injuries to the point his body was almost in ruins, and it was extremely likely that he would fall right here and now from being sieged by 3 top experts. Most terrifying of it all was the tribulation flames in his body blazed more and more brilliantly, causing his golden core to melt into a ball of liquid that floated where it used to stand, and if it was burned a step further, it might be completely incinerated to nothingness by the tribulation flames. Once the golden core was destroyed, it was no different than the Tao Foundation being destroyed. At that time, not to mention continuing to cultivate, it would be difficult for him to even survive. In the sky, the surging tribulation clouds grew more and more condensed, and the lightning within it had even transformed into pagodas, bells, cauldrons, furnaces, seals, and other weapons that were used to crush an enemy. However, even though the energy of destruction it emitted grew more and more terrifying, it just happened to not send down any tribulation lightning up until now, and it seemed to be accumulating strength and caused one's scalp to go numb from just the thought of this. What's going on? The tribulation lightning isn't descending after so long. How am I supposed to overcome it? Xianxia pondered as he fought his formidable enemies. Blood flowed out from the corners of his mouth as he exerted all his strength to urge out the potential in his entire body with the intention of making the tribulation lightning descend. Bang! Xianxia was struck on the back by Qin Zhao's mountain form seal, causing him to be blasted flying and shattered an enormous rock on his way before his entire body was smashed into the dirt, causing bloodstains to mottle the ground. The Inferno Crane plunged down with the intention of adding on another claw and finishing Xianxia before seizing the flaming peacock fan. Xianxia was furious. He'd originally hoped to overcome the tribulation while in battle before crushing all the experts that besieged him, yet never had he expected that only the tribulation flames were incinerating his body. Yet the tribulation lightning hadn't descended after so long, and this caused his plans to be unable to be carried out after so long. Now he was even forced into a hopeless situation and was about to face the calamity of death. So how could he not be furious? At this moment, he felt as if even the heavens were going against him. Xianxia was indeed furious to the point even his spirit, energy, and essence revealed traces of going berserk. His back had almost been shattered inch by Qin Zhao's mountain form seal, causing fresh blood to gurgle out. Moreover, it consumed too much of his shaman energy to repair, causing him to completely lose the strength to battle. Damn it! Since the heavens won't help me, I'll use their strengths to forcefully charge through. Xianxia gritted his teeth as a trace of madness flashed in his eyes, and his gaze contained a wisp of ruthlessness and a strand of resolution. Bang! Meanwhile, the Inferno Crane's claw had already torn through the sky to arrive before him and caused violent winds to rage in the surroundings. Merely the strength that effused out from the claw had already caused an enormous pit to shatter open on the ground. Bang! Xianxia raised his head abruptly before stretching out his hand to grab directly onto the enormous claw of the Inferno Crane. At the same time, the sound of thunder rumbled all around him as numerous thunderstorm vortexes appeared successively, and they revolved madly as they started to absorb the quintessence within the Inferno Crane's body. You're just an ant from an ordinary dynasty. It doesn't matter no matter how formidable your cultivation is, since you dare offend the dignity of this crown prince. No one in the entire world can save you. Die! At the same time, Qin Zhao had charged over as well like an overlord that had descended into the world, and he directly struck out at Xianxia. Bang! Xianxia forcefully received the strike with his other hand before grabbing onto Qin Zhao's hand, and he similarly mobilized thunderstorm vortexes to madly swallow the quintessence within Qin Zhao's body. The divine ability Stellar Lightning Form was a terrifying divine ability that came from within the bones of a rock, and it contained boundless might and encompassed the grand Tao insights of lightning, water, and devour. It was capable of swallowing everything in the world and even devouring the attacks of one's enemy before refining the energy devoured into true essence, shaman energy, vital energy, and so on and so forth that would be absorbed into the body, causing it to be exceedingly profound. However, this divine ability depended on circumstances as well. Just as his third senior brother had said, if the enemy was sufficiently strong, then forcefully devouring and refining the enemy's strength would be extremely dangerous instead, and it would very easily result in the collapse of one's body, causing one to die a graveless death. You're courting death. Both Bai Lingyun and Qin Zhao sneered at the same time. Both of them had great backgrounds, so how could they not know the profundity of such a divine ability? Even though they were secretly shocked that Xianxia had actually mastered the rare Devour Dao insight, they weren't worried in the slightest. Because Xianxia's strength had already weakened, he was someone that was about to die. They only had to mobilize their own strength and cause him to fail in the devouring of their strength, and this would cause him to destroy himself from the backlash. On the other side, Pei Yu had stopped his attacks as he'd already perceived that Xianxia would die without a doubt, and he wasn't willing to take any risks. After all, if he were to force Xianxia to detonate his golden core, it would be anything but good. Unfortunately, what he didn't know was that Xianxia's golden core had already been transformed into liquid by the tribulation flames. Moreover, it was on the verge of being incinerated and evaporated into nothingness. So it was impossible to detonate it any longer. Both the Inferno Crane and Xianxia sneered and held disdain in their eyes, and then they fiercely mobilized their strength with the intention of using their energy to rip Xianxia apart from within. Absorb! At this moment, Xianxia roared loudly, and not only did he not take precautions against this, he even led the two streams of energy into his body to mix with his own true essence with the intention of crushing the tribulation flames within his dantian. At the same time, his soul stretched out to link up with the heavens and the earth as he intended to seize this opportunity to draw down the tribulation lightning in the sky. Rumble! An extremely terrifying fluctuation stretched out from where they stood, flattening the surrounding ruins in an expanse of 500 kilometers, and it was like a surging and violent wave that caused the expressions of the distant spectators to abruptly turn to one of shock as they swiftly retreated from being deeply afraid of being affected. The rocks and mountains in an area of 500 kilometers were turned into powder, while the ground split apart into dense crisscross cracks that were like spider webs that extended for 3 kilometers. Besides that, space was shattered as the ground sunk, and the entire world seemed to have been warped. Xianxia let out a pained, muffled groan as his features warped. It felt as if he was being sliced up by 10,000 blades. His soul felt as if it was being split apart inch by inch, being struck, tortured, burned, and crushed. It felt as if his entire body was within a furnace of purgatory, impossible to endure. Even though Xianxia had faced difficulties while cultivating up to this point, he'd traversed it, yet only the torture he suffered today had caused him to be on the verge of collapse, and he was suffering a type of unparalleled pain and torture at each passing moment. Tribulation flames flickered into existence around his body, and they swayed indeterminately. They seemed as if they were about to condense, yet shook apart, whereas in the sky above him, tribulation lightning rumbled as crimson-red arcs of lightning grew more and more dazzling and brilliant, and it seemed as if they were about to descend. He seems to be relying on the strength of his opponents to crush the tribulation flames and draw down the tribulation lightning to condense a rebirth wheel in his dantian and overcome the rebirth tribulation. All the spectators gasped. This fellow Xianxia is truly too audacious. Could it be that he doesn't know that the slightest mistake would cause his death? Not to mention it's impossible that Bai Lingyun and Xianxia would cooperate obediently. Reality was just as everyone had inferred. Bai Lingyun and Xianxia wished for nothing more than for Xianxia to die as soon as possible, so they naturally wouldn't cooperate. Conversely, they mobilized their entire strengths to charge even more violently into Xianxia's body and rampage about like two savage and dreadful monsters with the intention of splitting Xianxia's body apart. Xianxia's body ached to the point he let out successive muffled grunts and ceaselessly coughed up blood. The meridians in his entire body felt as if they were being incinerated as countless cracks appeared on the surface of his flesh and skin, causing him to seem as if he was about to explode. But this extremely intense pain seemed to have completely aroused Xianxia's ferocity instead, and he roared furiously and repeatedly as thunderstorm vortexes rumbled like thunderclaps and forcefully drew the extremely formidable strength of Bai Lingyun and Xianxia to charge within his dantian, utilizing their strength to crush the tribulation flame. Exactly. Xianxia hadn't give up. Even if it was this extremely dire moment, he hadn't relaxed in the slightest and was still trying his best to use their strengths with the intention of completing this extremely dangerous rebirth tribulation. Rumble. The thunderstorm vortex's rumbles and actually faintly revealed an expanse of the ocean when it had arrived at its limit. A black-colored large fish swam and transformed into the image of a golden rock that blotted out the sky. The rock transformed from fish to bird when leaving the sea. Its wings hung in the sky and covered an area of a few tens of thousands of kilometers. It flapped its wings straight up to the 9 heavens, wandered the boundless universe, and devoured everything before it. At this moment, the image of this golden rock appeared and devoured all energy in the surroundings, and it actually directly devoured and refined all the energy that Xianxia drew over. Shit! The expressions of both the Inferno Crane and Xianxia went grim as they noticed that events had exceeded their expectations. Their true essence, vital energy, and even blood essence charged ceaselessly into Xianxia's body without restraint, and then it assisted him in suppressing the tribulation flames. Go all out. Both of them promptly decided and exerted all their strengths with the intention of turning the situation around. However, to their astonishment, all their resistance and struggles had no effect at all and didn't even give rise to the slightest ripple, and it was even to the extent they felt they'd fallen into a swamp, causing them to be unable to move and be confined on the spot. What? He's actually about to succeed. No, the rebirth tribulation still hasn't descended, and there's still a chance to annihilate him. Quickly. Seize this opportunity to stop him. We must absolutely not allow him to seize the fortune of the world and successfully overcome the tribulation. At this moment, Wei Kong, Cheng Feng and the few other people who remained after experiencing the horrifying battle from before had noticed that it wasn't going well, and they charged over right away. Even Pei Yu didn't hesitate in the slightest to charge towards Xianxia. All of them were unable to endure there being any chance that Xianxia would be able to survive, let alone turn the situation around. Otherwise, once this happened, it would absolutely be a calamity. However, before they could even approach him, they encountered the obstruction of a terrifying fluctuation that shook them to the point they coughed up large mouthfuls of blood, and they were dispersed and scattered in the surroundings and found it impossible to take a step closer. An indescribable and terrifying domain had actually been formed here. The expressions of Pei Yu and the others instantly became extremely unsightly when they saw this scene. Could it be that we really have to watch helplessly as this fellow suppresses the tribulation flames? At this moment, even though Xianxia was in extreme pain and his entire body seemed as if it had broken apart, he was extremely excited as he'd already almost completely crushed the tribulation flames by relying on the energy devoured and refined from Qin Shao and Bai Lingyun. Everything seemed as if it was about to turn around. Time passed by bit by bit. Xianxia's entire body was glowing brilliantly. The tribulation flames were almost indistinct within his dantian, and they were in strands and traces that were about to be extinguished. Moreover, his golden core that had been melted had started to condense once more instead, and it wasn't condensing into a golden core but a rebirth wheel. Once the tribulation flames were eliminated, the golden core would transform into a rebirth wheel. Once the tribulation lightning was eliminated, the soul would transform and produce a soul core instead, and it would be nurtured within the rebirth wheel. However, what caused Xianxia's heart to sink was that the tribulation lightning in the sky still hadn't descended, and it instead became more and more violent. Some of the bolts of lightning within it had even transformed into numerous palaces, mountains, and rivers. The sight of it was extremely vast and terrifying, and it simply seemed like a small world had been condensed up in the sky. There was an expanse of vast heaven and earth constructed from the energy of the tribulation lightning, while various weapons, mountains, rivers, palaces, pagodas, and so on and so forth were condensed into form from tribulation lightning, causing it to only lack living creatures. Every single thing formed by the tribulation lightning emitted a destructive energy capable of crushing the heavens and the earth. It was the might of the heavens, the punishment developed by the heaven Tao, and it was majestic, grand, and shook the heavens and the earth. It astonished all the spectators to the point of being dumbstruck, and their entire bodies trembled without end. My God! Tribulation lightning taking form and developing such a vast phenomenon. Could it be that this fellow is a genius that's rare in 10,000 years and has to suffer such a terrifying tribulation? Everyone was practically suffocated and didn't dare believe their eyes. If a tribulation like this were to descend, they felt they were absolutely unable to go against such a formidable tribulation lightning. Rumble. However, right when Xianxia was about to condense a rebirth wheel in his dantian, an enormous rumble that shook the heavens and the earth resounded out, and it illuminated the heavens and the earth extremely brilliantly before transforming into a crimson-red lightning halberd that slashed down at Xianxia. At that instant, the entire heavens and the earth was filled by the brilliance of this lightning halberd, and it was extremely dazzling as it awed everyone around it. Bang! The lightning halberd directly struck onto Xianxia and directly blasted him flying, and fresh blood sprayed from his mouth as a layer of terrifying injuries that seemed as if he was on the verge of splitting apart appeared on his body. Besides that, the rebirth wheel in his body instantly blurred and once again split up into a liquid form golden core. Moreover, the tribulation flames had once again start blazing within him. Xianxia fell into a cloud of dust. The cracks on his body were terrifying and his injuries severe to the extreme. So long as a single tribulation lightning descended or someone struck him a single time, he would surely be split apart into pieces and become a pile meat chunks. He gritted his teeth and stayed silent while mobilizing the shaman energy in his entire body, and he silently repaired his body while maintaining an expressionless face. At the critical moment, he was interrupted by the tribulation lighting that had even completely crushed the trace of advantage he tried his best to reclaim and had once again fallen into a perilous situation, and he'd almost lost his life. This sudden blow would have caused anyone to despair and abandon all resistance since long ago. But Xianxia didn't. His expression was stiff as he raised his head to look at the sky, and he endured the boundless pain as he healed his injuries silently. After it emitted the lightning halberd, the surging lightning world in the sky seemed to have fallen into silence, and it seemed to be accumulating strength, causing the silent atmosphere to press down upon everyone to the point they were unable to catch their breaths. In the distance, Bai Lingyun and Xianxia had suffered the strike of the tribulation lightning as well, causing them to be blasted flying and cough out large mouthfuls of blood, and their entire bodies trembled, yet their injuries were much lighter than Xianxia. Everyone present was stunned after witnessing this scene. The mighty and vast lightning that represented the might of the heavens hadn't descended for a long time, yet it had suddenly descended when Xianxia was about to successfully condense a rebirth wheel. Could this be as the saying, "The might of the heavens is unfathomable, and it can't be defied"? Sure enough, overcoming the rebirth tribulation in battle is utterly impossible. Even the Heaven Tao is unable to allow such an oddity, and Xianxia before us is a living example. Someone sighed with emotion in his heart. No matter how peerless one's natural talent and strength was, one had to suffer punishment and hardships if one wanted to go against the Heaven Tao, and it was to the extent that one's life might be in jeopardy. Ha ha ha! Even the Heaven Tao isn't able to allow an oddity like you to exist. Quickly atone for your sins with death. After being stunned for a moment, Peiyu and the others suddenly started roaring with laughter, and all of them heaved a sigh of relief. As they spoke, their figures had already flashed out explosively towards Xianxia with the intention of annihilating him. They wanted to seize this opportunity where he was weakened to finish him off. Swoosh! Xianxia leaped up from the ground before turning and leaving with an extremely swift speed, causing him to vanish in the horizon in the blink of an eye. During the short period of time earlier, he'd only recovered some fatal and heavy injuries, allowing him to be barely able to protect himself. Now, when facing the counterattack of all these people, he was already powerless to fight them until the end, and he could only temporarily avoid them and recover his injuries while fleeing. Give chase! How could Peiyu and the other let go of such a good opportunity? Xianxia was heavily injured and on the verge of death, and it was precisely the best opportunity to kill him. If they were to miss this opportunity, then they would absolutely regret it for their entire lifetime. At the same time, Bai Lingyun and Xianxia soared up and pursued along the traces she left behind. Actually, there was utterly no need for them to distinguish a direction, and they only had to raise their heads and look into the sky. Because along with Xianxia leaving, the tribulation clouds in the sky had actually moved along with him, and it followed like a shadow that was exceedingly conspicuous. In other words, no matter where Xianxia fled or where he hid, so long as they took a glance at the tribulation lightning in the sky, others would be entirely capable of easily noticing his tracks. Meanwhile, as they looked at the lonely figure that fled for his life while accompanied by tribulation clouds, a trace of horror couldn't help but arise in the hearts of every single spectator to the battle. If this fellow survives, then what height would he achieve in the future? The space within the Isle of Fallen Treasures was boundlessly vast like a continent that floated atop the primitive sea, and it was covered with ruins and crimson-red earth that was completely barren. Brilliant glows of treasures would occasionally charge into the sky and draw the pursuit of group after group of genius experts. These glows of treasures were treasures left behind by the gods. They were treasures left behind when the ancient gods went out on an expedition, and so long as one subdued a single one, it would sufficient to be boundlessly useful to any cultivator. But Xianxia wasn't concerned with all of this. He'd executed the Starsky wings with his entire strength while flying at extreme speed in the boundless heavens and earth, and he was like a bolt of lightning or a strand of a translucent flowing light. His entire body was covered in blood and completely covered in cracks. His entire body was filled with a boundless and sharp burning pain, yet his expression was stiff and cold to the extreme, and it was as if he was a wooden puppet that didn't know pain. Piercingly cold gales blew onto his face and felt painful as if blades were slicing him, and it blew to the point his hair and bloodied clothes fluttered with the wind, yet it was incapable of blowing away the stubbornness and unyielding expression in his eyes. The tribulation clouds in the sky enveloped his surroundings and accompanied him as he flashed in the sky, and the crimson red and dazzling bolts of lightning had transformed into a tiny world that emitted a destructive aura that intended to crush the heavens and the earth. It was the might of the heavens, a punishment, and it was immeasurable and unfathomable. At this moment, it hung above the sky and hadn't descended for a long time, causing it to seem like a blade that was pressed against one's neck, a sharp sword that hung above one's head, and it caused despair and uneasiness. The secrets of the heavens, the heaven Tao, the will of the heavens, the punishment of the heavens. Ha! The dazzling tribulation lightning in the sky was reflected in Xianxia's eyes as the corners of his mouth were suffused with a trace of ridicule, and he seemed to be ridiculing the heaven Tao yet also seemed as if he was ridiculing himself. But in next to no time, this wisp of ridiculing transformed into a wisp of resoluteness and ruthlessness. He wouldn't give up, even in death. Xianxia was heavily injured and on the verge of dying. The might of the heavenly tribulation lingered in the sky above him while formidable enemies pursued him beneath the skies. An unprecedentedly great pursuit had begun, and the entire Isle of Fallen Treasures was seething with excitement. The news spread out in all directions and throughout the entire primeval battlefield, and it instantly gave rise to a mighty uproar as everyone was shocked. Firstly, all the genius experts of the Snorre dynasty, Skywolf dynasty, and Easter Sumer dynasty that had entered the Isle of Fallen Treasures had been completely annihilated. How shocking was this news! Yet the person who did this was only a young man, a lone young man that fought numerous enemies by himself and carried out a slaughter with unstoppable might. Moreover, he'd even obliterated Pei's heavenly Immortal's decree, and such a ferocious and heaven-defying ability even caused them to be flabbergasted and feel disbelief. This matter gave rise to much discussion in the primeval battlefield, and everyone was discussing it, causing the genius experts of the Darjin dynasty who hadn't entered the Isle of Fallen Treasures to be unable to hold their heads up high. Besides that, Xianxia had actually drawn the dual rebirth tribulations while being besieged by numerous experts and intended to advance to the rebirth realm in battle, and he'd even almost succeeded. Even though he failed on the verge of success in the end, this was even more shocking. On this day, all the genius experts of the various dynasties within the entire primeval battlefield had heard of this matter, and all of them were discussing it clamorously. Head to the Isle of Fallen Treasures to kill Xianxia. This command appeared amongst numerous dynasties like the first-rate dynasties of the Darjin, Darxian, and Darqian dynasty, and the Snorre, Skywolf, Eastern Summer, and other ordinary dynasties. After all, the genius experts that had perished at Xianxia's hand were merely a portion of all the genius experts from these dynasties. At this moment, when they heard their companions had encountered difficulties, they naturally couldn't stand idly by. Great chaos quickly arose on the Isle of Fallen Treasures. The entrance to the primitive sea and Isle of Fallen Treasures was locked down while numerous dynasties joined forces to search and pursue Xianxia, and they intended to kill him in the Isle of Fallen Treasures without giving him the chance to survive. They'd sworn to not rest until they killed Xianxia, as they would be unable to eat and sleep in peace otherwise. This was a sanguinary event and a great upheaval, causing the entire area of ruins of the Isle of Fallen Treasures to be in chaos. Xianxia hadn't slept nor rested for a few days straight, as he'd always been fleeing. However, no matter where he went, His enemies would be able to catch up to him extremely quickly because the tribulation clouds had always enveloped the sky above his head, and it followed like an extremely conspicuous shadow. During these past few days, he'd encountered countless blockades and fought ceaseless battles, causing his entire body to be covered in blood. During the most severe encounters, he'd encountered Qin Xiao and Bai Lingyun, and the successive battles had caused his injuries to become even more severe and terrible, causing the vital energy within his body to be on the verge of collapse. Most terrifying of it all was the exit of the Isle of Fallen Treasures had been locked down and was guarded by numerous experts, so he was utterly incapable of retreating from the Isle of Fallen Treasures. This situation continued for half a month. During this period, Xianxi's shaman energy was on the verge of exhaustion, and he already lacked the strength to recover the injuries that covered his body. So at this moment, his body was tattered and covered in countless injuries. He could perish at any moment, and he was relying on his last breath to support himself. Finally, he'd escaped another pursuit and hid himself within a cavern in a mountain range before silently healing his injuries. His time was limited, and he had to make the best use of his time or his enemies would chase up once again. He appeared to be like an injured lone wolf that was licking its wounds, wild, unyielding, and would never give up the hope of survival. This mountain range was enveloped in mist. Its sky had thunderstorms raging about it all year long, so hiding within it would allow him to conceal the expanse of tribulation clouds that he'd drawn out to a certain extent. During these past few days, he'd always been pondering why the tribulation lightning hadn't descended all this time. He'd seriously inferred and considered yet was never able to wrap his head around it, and it was even to the extent he started to suspect the tribulation was intentionally going against it. Otherwise, why hadn't it descended until now? If it was anyone else, the person would have probably started to accept the test and transformation of the tribulation lightning on the exact same day it arrived, right? This sort of situation was too peculiar. Xianxia took a deep breath and started to inspect his injuries. The injuries his body had suffered were severe to the extreme and were almost irreparable. His body was tattered, and coupled with the countless life and death battles he'd encountered during this half a month of time, the vital energy in his body had already weakened to the point of almost drying up. "I'm really not resigned to this fate," Xianxia muttered to himself. Even if it was at this moment, he didn't believe he would be killed, nor did he give up, and he was still healing his injuries while deducing the rebirth tribulation. Bang! Another battle broke out 2 hours later, as his enemies had caught up, and Xianxia fought desperately while bathed in blood to escape once again. After he escaped this time, he'd arrived at a swamp that was filled with poisonous bugs in the end. His entire body was torn apart like cotton fibers, and it seemed as if a gust of wind would be able to blow him apart. Fresh blood gurgled out and was absorbed by the foul-smelling swamp beneath him, and his entire body seemed to be on the verge of being buried within the swamp. Xianxia lay on his back within the swamp while he stared fixedly at the expanse tribulation clouds that surged and whistled with lightning in the sky above him. The sound of lightning that shook the surroundings seemed like the ridicule and mocking of the heaven Tao. It was so jarring and so infuriating. "You intend to kill me? Impossible!" Xianxia suddenly seemed like a trapped beast that was on the verge of death as he emitted an extremely hoarse roar from his throat, and he hysterically expended the last strand of strength within his entire body to struggle up and begin the final charge. So long as life remained, the battle would never end. If rebirth wasn't overcome, how could he submit to death? He completely opened his mind and completely disregarded if enemies were approaching or not, nor did he pay attention to danger that might be present in this smelly swamp he was in, and his entire mind was extremely empty and seemed as if he'd forgotten everything in the surrounding world. His body was extremely tattered, his spirit, energy, and essence practically exhausted. The golden liquid within his dantian was dark, mottled, and without the slightest vitality, and the shaman energy within his body was completely dried up and shriveled. All of this caused him to seem like a dried-up lamp whose flame was about to be extinguished. It was precisely because of this that his charge to the rebirth realm seemed extremely strenuous, and it seemed like it was very likely he would perish halfway through his effort. Time slowly crept by and Xianxia kept on persevering, as there was always persistence and unyieldingness within his heart that guided him and caused him to be unwilling to give up. But in the end, he failed. He'd exhausted his last bit of strength and was completely exhausted of all energy, causing the vital energy in his entire body to dim down and be devoid of the slightest shred of strength. At this moment, he was already no different than a corpse. He merely possessed a consciousness, yet his body was already withered, and without the essence of life to nurture him, he would perish in the end and vanish within the heavens and the earth. Bang! Suddenly, right at this moment, a vast and powerful aura stretched out. When he was completely exhausted of everything, the potential that was hidden within the deepest depths of his body was released, and it charged out like an ocean. His entire body was glowing as his terrifying injuries were healing swiftly, whereas dazzling rays of light were rising and densely filled the space within his dantian. Rumble! The dazzling rays of light condensed with his liquid golden core to transform into an extremely dazzling and resplendent crimson-red rebirth wheel. Within his dantian, the qi of yin and yang gushed out like auspicious qi and developed boundless profundities, while crimson rays of light danced about like fairies of fire that were dancing gracefully, and they caused the rebirth will so seem like the sun, falling into a state of death to achieve rebirth. My body was tattered and everything within my body was completely exhausted. Now I've turned from death into life. This is the true profundity of rebirth. It's rebirth, new life, a new beginning. At this moment, Xianxia completely understood it thoroughly. Every single cultivator overcame the rebirth tribulation in a different manner, and the situations they encountered weren't the same, whereas it was extremely rare for one to turn around life and death to develop a rebirth will like Xianxia. The new supersedes the old. If one doesn't lose his strength, one is unable to experience the tribulation, and the general idea of rebirth is probably like this. Xianxia muttered to himself as the rebirth wheel within his dantian emanated a myriad of crimson brilliance that surged like wheels of flame, and it nurtured the vital energy in his entire body. This time, his injuries had indeed arrived at the point he was on the brink of death. He would have undoubtedly died under ordinary circumstances, and it was utterly impossible for him to survive. But at the instant he was on the brink of death, vitality had re-emerged and the situation had taken a turn, allowing him to complete the process of rebirth and experience a transformation of life itself that allowed his survival. The rebirth will circulated within his dantian and emanated a myriad of crimson-red rays of essence. Every single strand caused the potential in his body to surge and completely come back to life, causing his body to seem like a dead place that once again radiated vitality and rose up exuberantly. His tattered body was similarly repaired like a cracked expanse of ground that received rain after a drought, causing it to glow with vigor and vitality, and his spirit, energy, and essence even soared like a rainbow and was dazzling as if it was divine. Rumble! Within Xianxia's body, his potential that emerged from experiencing death and regaining life surged like a great river before gushing into his rebirth wheel, causing it to emit boundless radiance, and he'd already recovered to his peak state in a mere few breaths of time. Moreover, his body emitted ferocious baleful qi that shook the world. He suddenly stood up and placed his hands behind his back while looking up into the sky. Vast tribulation clouds hung in the sky while rumbling with surging tribulation lightning, and it had transformed into a world of lightning. The swamp was covered with putrid mud and bones that were floating and had sunk to the bottom, and it emitted an awful stench. Various poisonous bugs and repulsive birds lived within it while consuming the various living creatures that fell into the swamp, causing it to be an extremely brutal and ferocious place. However, at this moment, all these poisonous bugs and repulsive birds lay prone on the ground while feeling terror and unease in their hearts as they bowed in worship. In the depths of the swamp, the mud was tainted red by blood. Xianxia's tall figure stood proudly while adorned with clothes that were in rags and tainted with blood. Yet his entire body emitted strands of auspicious rays of light that were peaceful and sacred, and these rays of light were nurturing his body while repairing his injuries. On the other hand, boundless potential was rising exuberantly within his body and spread throughout his body through the rebirth wheel that was dazzling like the sun, causing a sort of transformation to occur within him. Being able to come to this point was truly difficult. He'd experienced countless intense and desperate battles during these past few days, causing his body to become tattered and almost split apart, and even the vital energy within his body had dried up, so he could already be considered to have died. It was even to the extent that it could be said that he'd experience a true death, a death that completely emptied out all the vitality and energy within his body, losing strength to attain the tribulation and overcoming adversity to eliminate the tribulation. It was equivalent to completely beginning from the start. This was true rebirth. From living to dying, from death to new life. How could an ordinary person be able to endure the danger and adversity of this process? A path of overcoming the tribulation like this was extremely rare and the most difficult, and most of the cultivators in the world would absolutely not try it lightly. Even if one possessed shocking natural talent, it was possible that one would perish at the end of the path. This past half a month of time was torture before rebirth to Xianxia. He'd held an eternally persistent heart amidst frustration, anguish, and hardships, and he'd suffered tortures akin to purgatory. Now, he was radiating new life and had finally succeeded. No, he could only be considered to have succeeded partially because Xianxia raised his head to look towards the sky. Tribulation lightning covered a vast expanse above him while emitting a boundless aura of destruction. It was the tribulation lightning of rebirth, and only by overcoming it would his soul transform into a soul core and be considered to have truly advanced into the rebirth realm. Moreover, he'd come to a complete understanding now about why his tribulation lightning would develop into a world of lightning and seem so terrifying. The reason was extremely simple. His body refinement and chi refinement cultivation were both about to break through and advance at this moment. It was common knowledge that chi refinement and body refinement were two different schools. After a chi refiner advanced into the rebirth realm, a rebirth wheel would be condensed within the dantian and used to nurture the soul core. So long as the soul core remained, then once one's body was destroyed, one could seize the body of another to attain new life. On the other hand, once a body refiner advanced to the rebirth realm, the body would advance and transform into a rebirth gold body, and the body would be used to nurture the soul core. So long as the soul core remained, the body would forever be unable to be destroyed. Because at that time, the body refiner would be able to reconstruct a complete body with a single thought. Comparatively speaking, it was still body refiners that were slightly more formidable. Because after chi refiners seized the body of another, there was a comparatively high level of danger associated with it, whereas body refiners had utterly no need of worrying about any danger arising. It was precisely because of this that the tribulation lightning of chi refinement and body refinement cultivators when they advanced to the rebirth realm was different. At this moment, the tribulation lightning Xianxia had drawn over were a mix of his body refinement and chi refinement cultivation, and its might was absolutely not as simple as 1 + 1. The terrifying energy of the tribulation lightning formed before his eyes had sufficiently proved this. Bang! The rebirth wheel that was like a sun within his dantian stopped moving. After it had truly condensed into form, it was like a full moon that represented perfection, and it emitted a hazy crimson glow as it soared through the sky like the sun and illuminated the dantian. Xianxia's rebirth will seem to be extremely formidable. It was vast, magnificent, and emitted a lofty and tremendous aura. True essence flowed and surged like waterfalls within it, and its quality had already transformed, causing it to emit a trace of an eternal aura. At the same time, the shaman energy within his body surged and whistled as the 9 shaman markings on his back enhanced the radiance of each other while emitting a brilliant sheen, and it nurtured every inch of his skin, flesh, bones, tendons, and internal organs, causing his vital energy and blood to become even more exuberant, and every single drop of blood seemed to be filled with vitality. Within his body, the sound of rumbling was like the sound of nature, like the rhythmic tune of the Tao, causing his blood, flesh, skin, and internal organs to resonate along with it and erupt out with strands of dazzling divine brilliance. This was the rebirth gold body, a body that was inviolable to flames and water, impenetrable to blades and spears, and completely untainted. So long as the soul core remained, the body was eternal. Bang! At the instant when Xianxia's body had completely transformed into the rebirth gold body, a strong fluctuation stretched out with a bang, and it was like a gale that swept through this swamp, causing even the swamp to tremble and undulate like the ocean. The mass of poisonous bugs and repulsive birds were even more terrified as they lay flat on the ground while trembling. Hazy mist enshrouded the surroundings, causing this swamp to seem extremely mysterious. Xianxia's body effused boundless vitality that was the essence of his vitality after achieving rebirth. Because of the appearance of the essence of vitality, the deathly air in his swamp was dispersed, causing the stench to be cleared away, and only exuberant vitality that was filled with hope and gave others the feeling of rebirth remained. It was even to the extent that all the plants in the swamp were growing ceaselessly, as if all the dried-up vitality here had experienced the process of rebirth just like Xianxia. The rebirth wheel and rebirth gold body are completed. Next is to experience the tribulation lightning and condense my soul core. Xianxia stared fixedly at the dark tribulation clouds in the sky as he muttered, and he seemed to be waiting. Presently, vitality filled his body like a surging sea, and it was strong to the point it caused the poisonous bugs and repulsive birds to tremble ceaselessly on the ground, and it was countless times more formidable than before. So long as he overcame the tribulation lightning in the sky above him, he would be able to stand in the rebirth realm, look down on most geniuses, and deter all before him. Because the tribulation lightning he was overcoming was both the rebirth tribulations, and it was even the tribulations of both the paths of body refinement and chi refinement. This sort of method of overcoming the tribulation was bound to make him different from others. However, up until this moment, the tribulation lightning still hadn't descended and was still accumulating strength. Crimson-red bolts of lightning flickered and formed into various weapons, palaces, mountains, rivers, and pagodas, causing it to seem like a world of lightning. It was even to the extent that human-shaped lightning could vaguely be noticed to be condensing in the deepest depths of the tribulation lightning, and even though they seemed blurry, the might they emitted was terrifying to the extreme. But this was unable to affect Xianxia. He chose one of the tall mountains that stood towering in the swamp to sit cross-legged on before waiting silently with a calm expression and eyes that were bright, deep, calm, and tranquil, and his entire body was filled with spirit and energy, while the divine lights and auspicious chi around his body had been restrained. He looked at the sky while carrying an aura that seemed as if he'd returned to simplicity and nature. Along with Xianxia's aura being restrained, the terrifying fluctuation within the swamp left like a receding tide, and it gradually calmed down, causing the surroundings to cease being oppressive and deterring while only tranquility remained. Everything seemed to have ended, yet it seemed as if it had just begun. The poisonous bugs and repulsive birds within the swamp stopped trembling before getting up swiftly and fleeing. They seemed as if they'd obtained release, and all of them left this terrifying and strange place in unison. At this moment, the outer area of the swamp was extremely clamorous as a mass of experts from the various dynasties had set out to search for Xianxia's whereabouts with the intention of killing him. During this half-month of time, no matter if it was the Isle of Fallen Treasures or the entire primeval battlefield, it was in a complete uproar as everyone was animatedly discussing the matter while experts moved about, and all of them taking action. Xianxia is really terrifying. He's clearly on the verge of death, yet is still fleeing. Moreover, he hasn't been killed yet. He's simply tenacious to an unbelievable extent. He's formidable indeed, but he's already showing signs of being unable to continue any longer. If nothing unexpected happens, then he'll be killed in the next 2 days. After all, I heard that his body is almost ruined, and his vitality is on the verge of drying up. Xianxia's actions of slaughtering numerous genius experts of the various dynasties and fleeing for his life had now affected the minds of everyone. Presently, they'd already understood that Xianxia's potential was terrifying to the extreme, and this was something that could be perceived from how terrifying the tribulation lightning he drew out was. Once he was allowed to successfully overcome the tribulation, then it would absolutely herald the rise of a formidable opponent. The Darjin, Century Pool, Darxian, and the other dynasties that numbered over 10 in total were unable to tolerate such a situation occurring. Slashing apart a heavenly immortal's decree, annihilating numerous genius experts of the various dynasties by himself, and overcoming the tribulation while in battle, every single event was terrifying, and even though Xianxia had failed for now, it still caused them to be unable to be at ease. Even if it was the various dynasties that had no enmity with him, they anxiously paid close attention to this matter. Don't worry. According to the news that was just sent over, Xianxia just suffered an ambush. Even though he escaped, his vitality has already been completely severed to the point he's like a dried-up oil lantern. He won't last a few days. On this day, the Darqin and Darjin dynasty spread this news, causing all the people that were paying attention to this battle to be shocked extremely, and even the primeval battlefield was in an uproar. Some let out long sighs as they felt pity for Xianxia. If someone with such peerless natural talent was able to survive, he might be able to become a renowned figure in the dark reverie. But no matter how people sighed with emotion, the news was so brutal and impossible to change. Ha ha ha! The members of the Darqin and Darjin dynasty roared endlessly with laughter. If considered from their perspectives, Xianxia had to be eliminated, and Xianxia would be the greatest danger to them if he was allowed to survive. He has already escaped for half a month. This time, we must accomplish everything completely and annihilate him. Some members of the Snowray, Skywolf, and Eastern Summer dynasty revealed cold expressions as they spoke like this. They'd suffered heavy losses this time as all their companions that entered the Isle of Fallen Treasures were killed by Xianxia, causing them to be almost unable to walk proudly with their heads held high in the primeval battlefield, and it was a sense of humiliation to them. Let's go and start the operation. We ought to go annihilate this bastard. The numerous forces set out and searched the swamp in groups. Actually, besides them, there were forces from numerous dynasties that had chased over and approached this swamp. We almost caught him the last time. We must absolutely not allow him to escape this time. A young man that wore a crane feather robe spoke coldly with a gaze that seemed like bolts of lightning. Beside him, another young man in silver robes that possessed a dignified appearance said with a smile, "Lan Sun, don't be disgruntled. It was I and the other fellow Taoists that heavily injured him and had practically slashed him into two. Yet unfortunately, he was still able to escape. Humph. Then we'll see who takes his head first this time." Lan Sun grunted coldly. "Wait and see." The silver-robed young man's killing intent was aroused as well, and he laughed loudly as he spoke. Both of them didn't speak further before leading a few others to enter the swamp. Presently, everyone on the Isle of Fallen Treasures knew that Xianxia was heavily injured, and his vitality was dried up to the point he was about to perish. It was even to the extent that an ordinary wild beast was capable of causing his demise, and if they were still incapable of killing him, then it would really be an extreme loss of face. A group of people were moving forward swiftly within the swamp that was like a badlands. This group of people were formed from the genius experts of three powers, the Darqin, Darjin, and Century Pool dynasty. Even though Cui Xiahong, Wei Muyun, and Ling Qianqiu had died miserably at Qianxi's hand and only left Pei Yu behind, during this half a month of time, he'd sent a transmission jade slip out of the Isle of Fallen Treasures and gathered another 4 genius experts of the Darjin dynasty, so he wasn't all alone. Actually, it wasn't just Pei Yu, as even Qin Xiao and Bai Lingyun had called together numerous genius experts of their own dynasties. Now that all of them were gathered together, they were like an elite army that were of great strength and impetus. After we kill Xianxia this time, the quasi-immortal artifact, Flaming Peacock Fan, must become my possession. Both of you can deal with his other possessions as you please. Bai Lingyun swept the others with her gaze and spoke indifferently, and she seemed only have eyes for the Flaming Peacock Fan. All right, I want the sword in his possession. I presume everyone doesn't have any objections, right? Qin Xiao agreed readily, and at the same time, he raised his request and wanted the talisman armament in Xianxi's possession. That sword really is an extraordinary treasure. Bai Lingyun seemed to have thought of something as she'd naturally noticed how extraordinary the talisman armament in Xianxi's possession was during the fierce battle she had with Xianxi before this. Brother Pei, what do you think? Qin Xiao glanced at the silent Pei Yu and asked, and his voice revealed a trace of indistinct depression. Presently, Pei Yu's forces were the weakest amongst their group, and coupled with the knowledge that Pei Yu's trump card, the Heavenly Immortal's decree, was destroyed, Qin Xiao naturally wouldn't take him seriously. Of course. But since both of you have selected a treasure, the remaining things are mine. Pei Yu pondered silently for a long time before speaking out. He seemed to be compromising helplessly, but he was actually laughing coldly without end in his heart because according to his knowledge, Xianxia possessed a treasure that was even more precious, the sacred object stone tablet from the violent water flame apes, and its value wasn't inferior to a quasi-immortal object. Of course, he would absolutely not tell the others about it. All right, once we encounter Xianxia, the flaming peacock fan belongs to Miss Bai, the sword will be mine, and the remaining things belong to Brother Pei. Qin Xiao laughed loudly. As far as he was concerned, Xianxia was already a piece of meat on the chopping block and was unable to escape calamity. So it was impossible for Xianxia to survive. At another direction, the genius experts of the Darxian and Darqian dynasty were rushing over swiftly as well. They had enmity with the Darchu dynasty, and coupled with Xianxia having killed numerous companions of theirs, it had caused them to lose face extremely. They urgently needed to torture Xianxia to death. Otherwise they would be utterly incapable of washing away this shame. The genius experts of a first-rate dynasty weren't even capable of annihilating an ant from an ordinary dynasty. Was there anything more humiliating than this? I hope he can live longer and not die so quickly. The genius experts of the Darxian and Darqian dynasty had cold and indifferent expressions, and their entire bodies were suffused with bone-piercing killing intent. Speed up. We must not allow the others to beat us to him. In the distance, the group of experts from the Full Moon Kingdom flashed swiftly, and it was surprisingly Su Lingye who was in the lead. His expression was extremely gloomy and had obviously already found out clearly that the fellow who seized his flaming peacock fan was exactly Xianxia. So he'd led a group of experts to pursue Xianxia. Besides this, there were also a large group of people from various dynasties that had come purely for the sake of annihilating Xianxia, but they similarly had enmity with the Darchu dynasty, so they naturally were unable to tolerate the survival of a peerlessly monstrous genius like Xianxia. Otherwise, once Xianxia grew, it would undoubtedly be an enormous calamity to them. The members of the other dynasties are moving about over there. They've rushed over here at the first possible moment as well. We have to hurry. Not only must we kill Xianxia this time, we even have to completely plunder all the treasures in his possession. The Skywolf dynasty's Lan Sun's expression focused as he shouted in a low voice. The presence of the traces of the members of other dynasties in this swamp wasn't a good sign, as everyone knew that Xianxia possessed the quasi-immortal artifact, flaming peacock fan, and coupled with his monstrous combat strength, he probably possessed even more rare treasures, causing everyone to desire to obtain them. There are people there as well. The situation doesn't look to be good. Qin Xiao and the others were stunned as they'd noticed Lan Sun's group. Besides that, they'd also noticed that the experts of the Darxian and Darqian dynasty had rushed over as well. Instantly, there were group after group of genius experts from the various dynasties charging about within the entire swamp while multicolored streaks of light carried them to fly above the swamp, and it instantly caused the swamp to become clamorous. Numerous powers exposed their tracks as they rushed towards the depths of the swamp, because all of them wanted to be the first to kill Xianxia and seize the treasures in his possession. Looks like Xianxia is within this swamp. Quickly send the news and notify our people to quickly rush over. There were numerous experts that didn't approach and had turned around and left instead, and they dashed towards various locations around the Isle of Fallen Treasures with the intention of bringing their companions over. Rays of light flickered as streaks flashed through the sky, and they were like numerous shooting stars that tore through the sky. They seemed to be heralding that great chaos was bound to unfold in this tranquil swamp. During this period of time, the experts of the various dynasties had already started to compete with each other, and the Skywolf dynasty's Lan Sun was the most striking amongst them because Lan Sun's group was the last to ambush Xianxia, so they naturally knew in exactly what direction Xianxia was. On the other hand, Qin Xiao, Bai Lingyun, and Pei Yu's group weren't slow, and due to Xianxia's frequent and fierce battles, they'd already roughly grasped Xianxia's route of escape. In next to no time, their groups were the first to charge into a place in the swamp where an expanse of mountains stood towering. The tribulation clouds are over there. Someone had a discerning gaze and noticed the dark lightning clouds in the extreme distance with a single glance, causing him to instantly reveal an excited expression, because not only did this mean they would be able to annihilate Xianxia, they would also be able to obtain all the treasures in Xianxia's possession. As far as they were concerned, since the tribulation clouds were still in the sky, it proved that Xianxia hadn't overcome the tribulation successfully. Conversely, he was surely about to die, and he was like a tiger that had lost its teeth and posed no threat to them. One could even bluntly say that even if no one went to kill Xianxia, he would probably perish at any moment. Sure enough, there was a large expanse of blood-stained mud in the swamp, and large amounts of muddy water that were tainted red could be seen. Obviously, it was because Xianxia had lost too much blood and was about to perish. Lan Xun and the others were excited and swiftly scattered to surround this expanse of swamp, so as to prevent Xianxia from escaping once more. Qin Xiao and the others frowned before bluntly and forcefully charging through from a side. They had to interfere as Xianxia was right before them, so how could they allow another to beat them to him? You're about to die, yet you're still daydreaming. Looks like failing to overcome the rebirth tribulation and his imminent death has caused his mind to collapse, and he's immersed in dejection and regret. Haha, I fucking love seeing this type of despaired expression on someone that's about to die. As he looked at the tall figure that sat cross-legged on the peak of that mountain, the Skywolf dynasty's Lan Xun laughed coldly and felt extremely delighted, yet his eyes were ghastly and ruthless to the extreme. The others started laughing as well, as there was no better outcome than this. Besides laughing coldly, Qin Xiao and the others were also gritting their teeth because there was deep hatred between them and Xianxia. Half a month ago, countless companions of theirs had died at the hands of Xianxia, and it caused them to be hateful and resentful to the extreme. Xianxia was really daydreaming, and he was deducing why the tribulation hadn't descended until now in his mind. Before coming to the primeval battlefield, he'd once discussed everything related to the rebirth tribulation with Emperor Chu. Logically speaking, even if the tribulations of body refinement and chi refinement arrived at the same time, he should have greeted his tribulation lightning long ago. Yet now, the tribulation clouds in the sky above him were still hanging there without descending. It had developed a variety of lightning phenomena, and its impetus looked to be silent and without much movement, yet the destructive aura it emitted became more and more terrifying as they passed by. Could it be that I must be completely unguarded before it would suddenly descend and kill me by surprise? Xianxia frowned and suddenly stood up before looking up to the sky and shouting loudly. Hesitating fearfully, yet not descending for a long time, "Could this be your dignity as the tribulation of the heavens?" Everyone was stunned. Could it be that this fellow has gone mad? He's actually questioning the Heaven Tao. Looks like he has really been driven into an impasse. Otherwise he wouldn't have been angered to madness and start rambling madly. Be careful. Be on guard against his tricks. This kid's deeply scheming and extremely ruthless. We can't allow him to escape this time no matter what. Peiyu spoke coldly. He'd once come all the way from the primitive sea to the Isle of Fallen Treasures with Xianxia, so he could be said to understand Xianxia to the extreme. He knew that this fellow would absolutely not give up easily until the last moment had arrived, and Xianxia's actions were surely a trick. If it wasn't like that, he would have charged up to annihilate Xianxia at the first possible moment. Idiot! Starting to complain about the Heaven Tao being unfair when you're about to die? The Heaven Tao is utterly unable to tolerate a heretic like you. Swiftly slit your own throat and take your regret with you. The Skywolf dynasty's Lan Xun laughed coldly. As he spoke, he signaled everyone by his side that they should move out altogether once he made a move, and they must not give others an opportunity that could be exploited to the advantage of others. Xianxia's eyes swept down as if he'd just noticed that numerous experts had invaded, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help but be suffused with a trace of coldness, while his gaze even carried a trace of ridicule. What sort of gaze is that? Numerous people were furious. Person that's about to die dares act like this? This is undisguised ridicule towards us. Lan Xun and the others were just about to make a move when they were stopped by Qin Zhao's group in the end, and a dispute broke out because all of them wanted to kill Xianxia and seize the treasures in his possession. Everyone, we noticed this fellow first. It should be based on first come first serve, right? Lan Xun swept Qin Xiao and the others with his gaze. Even though he clearly knew that these people were either from first-rate dynasties or possessed extremely formidable strength, he wasn't afraid of them. Because the genius experts of the Snow-Ray dynasty and Eastern Summer dynasty were similarly by his side. Moreover, their numbers were more than double the size of Qin Zhao's group. Humph! Are you talking to me? Your Skywolf Dynasty's Di Wanlu and the others even received protection from this crown prince. Who do you think you are to dare mouth off at me? Quickly move aside. Chun, she must be killed by us today. If all of you don't appreciate the kindness we're showing, then don't blame us for being rude. Qin Shao grunted coldly as his gaze swept out like bolts of lightning, and he was extremely overbearing. In an instant, these two forces hadn't killed Xianxia yet, had actually come into confrontation with each other instead, and they were ready to jump at each other's throats. All of them seemed to think that Xianxia was completely devoid of the strength to battle and had become a piece of utterly harmless and juicy meat on their plate. So they'd started fighting each other without the slightest fear. Lan Xun and Qin Zhao's groups were in confrontation, and the atmosphere instantly became aggressive. How about this? We'll join forces to kill Chen, she first before privately discussing how to divide the treasures in his possession. In the end, Pei Yu spoke out, as he was afraid that an unforeseen event might occur if they delayed for too long. After all, it wasn't just their two forces that were present here, and there were other groups swiftly approaching as well. If another short moment passed, then these groups would probably join in as well and want a share of the pie. In that way, more and more unexpected events would arise. All right, then we'll kill Chun, she first before discussing how to divide the treasures. The silver-robed young man by Lan Xun's side nodded. It couldn't be any better. Pei Yu smiled as he replied, yet sneered in his heart as he swiftly sent a voice transmission to Qin Shao and Bai Lingyun. A group of bastards from ordinary dynasties actually dare vie with us. They're truly courting death. We'll temporarily tolerate it slightly first, and we'll get them later. Qin Shao and Bai Lingyun were extremely furious in their hearts as well, and they didn't hesitate in the slightest to agree to Pei Yu's plan. Don't worry. We'll flee once we finish plundering all Xianxia's treasures. The primeval battlefield is so huge, I don't believe they'll be able to pursue us. The silver-robed young man was extremely experienced as well, and he sent a voice transmission to Lan Xun and the others. Just like this, two groups that had their own ulterior motives surrounded him and moved forward with surging killing intent. It just so happened that she seemed to remain indifferent as the ridicule in his eyes grew even more dense, causing these complacent hunters that wanted to reap their prey to become even more furious. What sort of look is he giving us? No matter how they looked at it, it looked like a gaze towards a group of pitiful maggots, and there was utterly no sign of anxiousness. Could it be that he still thinks he'll be able to escape as before? He's truly courting death. Everyone gnashed their teeth, and their expressions revealed gloominess and uncertainty. What? You know clearly that doom is upon you, so you've started to become brazen and arrogant? Let me tell you, it's difficult for you to die this time, even if you want to. I'll make you understand how horrible and terrifying the consequences of offending my Skywolf dynasty is. An expert of the Skywolf dynasty roared with a savage expression. How terrifying? Chun-Shi asked in reply. Utter misery. The expert pointed at Chun-Shi while revealing a ghastly and gloomy smile. Oh? Looks like I seem to really be unable to escape calamity this time. Chun-Shi suddenly raised his hand before slapping the air in front of him. Pooh! The expert from Skywolf dynasty exploded into pieces, and he was directly slapped into a pile of mush. What? Everyone was greatly shocked. This fellow took a life with a single slap? That was a genius expert of the Skywolf dynasty. Everyone, don't panic. This bastard is like an arrow at the end of its flight. He's utterly unable to hold on for much longer. Didn't all of you see his display in the last battle? His vitality is ruined and dried up, and he's utterly unable to live for long. Someone shouted out loudly. Oh, you're even able to discern that? Then do you want to give it a try? Chun-Shi continued asking in reply. Humph. Thinking of playing tricks? Stop forcefully holding on. The vitality in your entire body is ruined, and even an immortal pill can't save you. Continuing to act like this will only make others look down on you. Not to mention the tribulation lightning above you hasn't dispersed. So even if we don't kill you, you won't be able to persist for long. Right? Pei Yu sneered from the side. The spirits of everyone was refreshed when they heard this. Right? The tribulation lightning is still present in the sky. This fellow is obviously making an empty show of strength. Perhaps that strike from before has already consumed all his strength. I don't want to make it difficult for you. Hand over the flaming peacock fan and I'll give you a swift death. How about it? Bai Lingyun's clear eyes spun before she stared at Xianxia and spoke indifferently. However, not everyone thought like this. Lan Xun's eyes flickered as he looked at the silver-robed young man at the side before he said, Han Bai, is the wager between us still on? Of course. His treasures belong to whoever who kills him. The silver-robed young man, Han Bai, replied without the slightest hesitation while his eyes burned with killing intent, and he started to approach. But for the sake of taking precautions against any unexpected events, he didn't make a move himself and made the others start attacking first, and he wanted to swiftly slaughter Xianxia. At the same time, Qin Shao, Pei Yu, and the others made a move. They didn't hesitate in the slightest to withdraw their quasi-immortal artifacts and execute their strongest martial techniques for the sake of completely finishing Xianxia off with a single strike. Can't wait any longer? But it's good this way as well. Now that I've already seen your repulsive characters, I'll send all of you on your way. Right at this moment, Xianxia's expression turned serious as his eyes became bright like bolts of lightning, and then a divine wheel that was like the sun faintly appeared behind him and emitted boundless crimson rays of brilliance and an extremely terrifying aura that caused shock in the hearts of all. Practically everyone felt suffocated as their hearts shook endlessly, and they felt as if they were facing an insurmountable mountain that was vast and lofty. What's going on? He successfully overcame the tribulation. An expert cried out in terror. The tribulation lightning is clearly floating in the sky. Yet why does he reveal the terrifying aura that only a rebirth realm expert can possess? Bang! A force field formed in Xianxia's surroundings as strong baleful qi spread out to shatter space and shake the world, and he revealed an exceedingly terrifying might. Pooh! In merely the blink of an eye, everyone that charged over exploded into pieces, causing blood to spray out before being incinerated into nothingness by the surging crimson rays of light that transformed into embers and caused no one to be able to approach. This might instantly shocked everyone, and the hearts of everyone shook greatly while their souls trembled. They simply didn't dare believe everything they'd seen. It was even to the extent that all the martial techniques and divine abilities that struck towards Xianxia were completely blasted apart and dispersed into nothingness. Even the numerous magic treasures were shaken to the point of wailing endlessly while they became dim and lusterless, and then they fell from the sky. Within the blazing crimson flames, Xianxia's black hair hung loosely on his shoulder, and his eyes were deep while the divine wheel that seemed like a sun behind him revolved slowly while deriving boundless profundities and revealing an indescribable majesty. He stood alone atop the mountain peak while his clothes fluttered, and he hadn't moved a single step from the beginning until the end. The crimson tribulation lightning above him surged and danced about wildly like a roaring thunderstorm sea, and dazzling and resplendent lightning flickered, causing him to seem like a devil god. Why is it like this? What has happened? The lips of everyone trembled as they felt a chill run down their spine, and they felt terrified to the extreme in their hearts. How do we go against such might? Everyone strike together. I don't believe we'll be unable to kill this bastard. The Skywolf dynasty's Lan Xun roared. However, before his words could even resound out in the air, Xianxia's entire body blazed to the extreme, and with a gesture of his hand, Lan Xun flew uncontrollably towards him. Why is it like this? Lan Xun cried out in terror. Who was he? The genius expert of the Skywolf dynasty that was even more formidable than Diwan Lu. Yet at this moment he was actually unable to control his body. Xianxia's expression was indifferent and had stretched his hand out to grab Lan Xun over from afar like a devil god. Lan Xun's figure struggled violently in midair, yet all struggles were futile. In the eyes of Xianxia, he was truly too weak now, and even if it was before Xianxia condensed the rebirth wheel, Xianxia would be able to easily kill a person like this, let alone now. Everyone was astounded. This was truly too terrifying. Even though Lan Xun was from an ordinary dynasty, he was a genius expert in any case, yet he was so weak in the end. Compared to Xianxia, Lan Xun was utterly useless and pitiably weak. I heard you were competing with another about who would be able to kill me first. Those that are ignorant are truly fearless. Xianxia raised his hand to grasp Lan Xun's throat, and then a clear crack resounded out as he directly broke Lan Xun's neck. He'd acted decisively and mercilessly as he swiftly ended Lan Xun's life, and his relaxed appearance caused it to seem as if he was slaughtering a chicken. No! All the members of the Skywolf dynasty cried out loudly and felt it was difficult to accept a scene like this. Lan Xun was an extremely important genius expert in their group who possessed a formidable strength and boundless potential, yet he'd actually died just like this and died so worthlessly. Swoosh! A matchlessly ghastly flying sword shot out explosively yet was grabbed by Xianxia with a raise of his hand, and it was as easy as grabbing something from his pocket. This was the terrifying aspect of the rebirth gold body. Ordinary flying swords were utterly unable to injure Xianxia in the slightest any longer. This flying sword was sent out by the silver-robed young man, Han Bai, and he'd already flashed out in a streak to flee towards the distance now. Xianxia was too terrifying, and even Lan Xun, who was equal in strength to him, had died miserably. So how could he dare stay for a moment? Your companion is dead. So what's the point of you remaining alive? Xianxia shouted coldly with a voice that resounded out like a bell and was dignified and murderous, and he swung out the flying sword with a flip of his palm. Swoosh! When this flying sword was swung out from Xianxia's hands, it was more than just 2 times stronger, and it was even to the extent one could clearly see the flying sword seemed to be unable to endure Xianxia's strength, causing the body of the sword to turn crimson as if on fire while showing signs of melting. Bang! It directly penetrated Han Bai's chest and penetrated a bloody hole the size of a small bowl on his heart, causing blood to spray out as he let out a shrill cry and fell dead to the ground. The hearts of everyone shuddered as their souls almost left their bodies. What sort of might is this? A sword that was swung out with a flip of his hand actually chased up and directly annihilated a genius expert. Everyone was horrified and cried out loudly in terror while charging out in all direction with the intention of splitting up and fleeing. They were truly afraid, and their entire bodies were icy cold because Xianxia's might was too monstrous, impossible to resist, and impossible to go against. Since you've come, then stay behind. Xianxia spoke lightly with an indifferent voice, yet it possessed a terrifying feeling of dignity that seemed like a devil god announcing his decree. Bang! With him as the center, countless thunderstorm vortexes exploded out. They were gorgeous, dazzling, and resplendent as they covered the heavens and the earth like tidewater and swept through the surroundings to envelop everyone before confining them within an area of 500 kilometers. The vast impetus of this caused others to almost think the tribulation lightning in the sky had erupted and instantly enveloped down to actually cause even space to fall into a sluggish state. All the experts felt as if they'd fallen into a swamp while being enveloped by these thunderstorm vortexes, and they were restrained by a powerful suction force, causing their figures to be on the verge of collapse and instantly slowing down their escape. What the fuck is this divine ability? How can it possess such a terrifying, devouring force? Everyone was horrified to the extreme as they howled out in shock, and they started struggling madly. However, all of this was bound to be a futile effort. In the next moment, bang! Countless thunderstorm vortexes devoured downwards, causing their figures to be crushed apart successively before being transformed into mush by the thunderstorm vortexes, and then the must sprayed out in the entire sky and emitted a pungent stench of blood. In a single move, besides a mere few tens of people that had utilized forbidden arts to escape the thunderstorm vortexes, everyone else was annihilated. However, Xianxia didn't even spare a glance at the bloody scene, and his expression was indifferent as he flew towards the outsides of the swamp while being coiled by brilliant crimson rays of light. He wanted to seek revenge, and as for the tribulation lightning in the sky, I'll let it follow my footsteps. Why should I give a damn about it? Quickly! Hurry up, or we'll be unable to get anything if we're late. Are all of you willing to let others beat us to him? If you're not willing, then quickly follow me. I heard that there are many treasures in Xianxia's possession. Don't make it come to the point we aren't even able to get some scraps. Then we'll probably die of regret. Quickly! Continue forward. Outside the swamp, a group of people dashed forward with extreme speed while the true essence in their entire bodies surged, and they charged towards the swamp. These were the genius experts of the Darshan and Darqian dynasty. All of them were experts that held the main objective of killing Xianxia and dividing up the treasures in his possession. They'd heard before they came that not only did Xianxia possess the quasi-immortal artifact, flaming peacock fan, he'd even crushed the heavenly immortal's decree, and if he didn't possess other precious treasures in his possession, they wouldn't believe it no matter what. At another direction, a group of experts had similarly appeared. All of them had formidable auras, gazes that were like bolts of lightning, and they moved swiftly like shooting stars that crushed space and possessed a vast impetus. These were experts of the Full Moon Kingdom, and the person in the lead was the eldest prince of the kingdom, Xianxia. For the sake of seizing back the flaming peacock fan this time, he could be said to have paid an enormous price to invite the genius experts of numerous dynasties to assist him. At this moment, they were flying beneath the sky in a dense and large array of an entire 50 or 60 people. Which power are they from? There are actually so many experts that have set out. Many people in the nearby areas raised their heads, and they revealed shocked expressions. There was a restriction to the number of people that could enter the primeval battlefield from every single dynasty, and even first-rate dynasties would at most be able to send in 30 people. But the group of people before them were an entire 50 or 60 people, and this was already absolutely able to be considered a terrifying force. Rumble. Xianxia was high in spirits and utterly didn't conceal the tracks of his group, and they crushed the sky all along the way. Merely the airflow that effused out from them caused numerous rocks to fly out and sand to suffuse the air. Let's go quickly as well. We can't fall behind. A quasi-immortal artifact is priceless, and it's only possessed by the core disciples of the 7 great first-rate dynasties. If we're able to obtain one, then we'll absolutely be able to obtain a spot in the final test of the primeval battlefield. Group after group of experts from the various dynasties rushed over and didn't retreat even when they saw Xianxia's vast army, and they charged swiftly towards the depths of the swamp. For a time, the sound of streaks tearing through the sky and whistling rose and fell, and it caused this entire expanse of the heavens and the earth to be clamorous. What a great force! Xianxia stopped moving. His clothes fluttered from the mountain breeze that blew over while his deep eyes seemed to have shot out 2 bolts of lightning as he'd noticed killing intent. He wasn't afraid, but was feeling slightly regretful that the strike from before was actually unable to kill Pei Yu, Qin Shao, Bai Lingyun, and the others, and he couldn't help but feel regretful. But he knew that so long as he was alive, these fellows would be unable to eat or sleep in peace. So they would surely appear once more before him, and he didn't have to search for them bitterly. We've found him, he's here. Haha. He's still alive. Looks like it's going to benefit us. At this moment, the clouds in all directions roiled as genius experts from countless dynasties rushed over. Some noticed Xianxia and instantly roared with laughter while feeling extremely delighted because they weren't late in the end. Needless to say, it was a form of luck to them that Xianxia actually hadn't been killed. This was a group of genius experts that were mostly from other dynasties that had encountered each other outside the swamp before charging over in unison, and they'd imperceptibly formed an extremely formidable force that encircled Xianxia here. Kid, calamity is at hand. Quickly hand over all the treasures in your possession, and I can let you die slightly more swiftly. Someone shouted out as they'd come for the sake of the treasures in Xianxia's possession. Killing to seize treasures? A wisp of coldness suffused the corners of Xianxia's mouth. A situation like this was extremely common as treasures moved the hearts of man, and so long as the temptation was sufficient, then one was capable of anything. Everyone laughed coldly when they heard this. Wasn't this nonsense? Could it be that we came to have a chat with you? In their perception, Xianxia was on the verge of death and had lost his combat strength long ago. Coupled with the surging tribulation cloud they saw in the sky above him, he obviously hadn't overcome the rebirth tribulation successfully. Under these circumstances, he was a piece of meat on the chopping block that was at their mercy. I advise you to obediently hand it over so as to avoid suffering. Otherwise, living is sometimes more painful than death. Someone laughed coldly as he ridiculed. These people felt that Xianxia was like a tiger that had its teeth pulled out now, and he couldn't even withstand a blow from them, so they could willfully bully him. Otherwise, if it was before, there would probably no one that dared charge forward. After all, the Xianxia from before was capable of slaughtering countless experts by himself and was peerlessly ferocious. All of you can feel free to try. Xianxia replied calmly. You really refuse to give in until death. Then don't blame us for being merciless. All of these people let out ghastly and cold laughter as they swiftly made a move. They were worried as well that an unexpected event would occur, and if the other forces were to rush over and interfere, they would mostly be unable to even obtain a share of the scraps. Bang! Various magic treasures charged into the sky while a variety of martial techniques poured out like extremely brilliant tidewater. As soon as these people made a move, they directly utilized their strongest attacks and enveloped the entire sky. The joint might of a few tens of people was naturally terrifying to the extreme, causing gales to rage in this area, and it crushed and blew away mountains and rocks while shattering the towering and ancient trees. Even though this group of people put on an extremely arrogant display, yet when they really made a move, they utilized all their strength because they were worried that an unexpected event might occur. Crimson rays of light shot into the sky as Xianxia withdrew the flaming peacock fan with a flip of his hand before fanning it out. A boundless sea of lava gushed and roared out as if countless volcanoes had erupted, and it transformed this area into a sea of flames. The 10+ people that charged at the front let out loud cried as they revealed shock and terror from their eyes. In the next moment, their bodies were already incinerated into nothingness by the blazing flames, and not even the slightest residue remained. This scene instantly caused the others to be horrified and feel as if they'd fallen into a pit of ice, and they turned around to flee right away. Unfortunately, it was too late. Presently, Xianxia had utilized the flaming peacock fan with his entire force, and its might had risen explosively by more than 1 or 2 times. The sea of flames enveloped down and instantly locked down all their paths of retreat and enveloped them within surging flames. In only the time for a few breaths, the remaining people transformed into ash amidst shrill cries, and they met a horrible death of being incinerated into nothingness. Their shrill cries before their death shook the heavens and the earth, and it caused anyone that heard it to feel terrified in their hearts. Besides this, an area of 500 kilometers in the surroundings had completely transformed into charred ground without the slightest vitality any longer. It was a completely barren expanse that didn't contain the slightest trace of blood or shattered bones. Xianxia departed once more, his figure agile yet neither swift nor slow, like a light breeze that blew by, a leaf that danced in the winds, and his bearing seemed even more extraordinary, causing him to utterly not seem like he'd just annihilated a group of experts. He's over there. Don't let him escape. Xianxia, give me back my flaming peacock fan. Finally, people rushed over again, but it was 2 groups of people. One group was the genius experts of the Darshan and Darqian dynasty, whereas the other group of the army left by Xianxia. There were numerous figures here, and the sounds of people tearing through the sky were resounding out from the distance. Obviously, the experts of the other dynasties were rushing over from all directions as well. This time, he could really be said to have enemies everywhere. However, Xianxia just raised his head to look to the sky. Within the tribulation lightning that roiled without end, Xianxia clearly saw a human-shaped lightning bolt appear, and it was like a spirit of lightning that held a weapon while floating in midair. This was an expanse of mountainous forests that were covered in ruins, and the lofty mountains were craggy and barren. At this moment, numerous streaks were whistling over from all around the mountainous forest, and they were overflowing with multicolored flowing lights, causing them to be rather gorgeous. Group after group of experts from the various dynasties swiftly rushed over while the sounds of shouting and the roars of beasts were interwoven together and shook the surroundings, causing it to seem extremely clamorous. Besides the Full Moon Kingdom's Xianxia's group and the experts of the Darshan and Darqian dynasty that were the first to rush over, there were numerous experts of the other dynasties, and they were a complicated mix of forces. When looked at from afar, there were at least a few hundred of people, and there were still numerous streaks rushing over from afar. This was a true situation of being surrounded by enemies. Even if it was a Rebirth Realm expert facing this scene, the expert would probably feel despair and give up resistance because these few hundreds of people represented the top figures of the younger generation, the genius figures of the various dynasties. Otherwise, it would be impossible for them to enter the primeval battlefield. But Xianxia seemed to completely not notice this, nor did he have the slightest awareness of being deep within an encirclement. And he had his hands behind his back while looking up at the sky with a deep gaze as if he was deducing something. "Move aside!" Xianxia shouted out loudly as he moved ahead of everyone. And then he gnashed his teeth and said with a murderous gaze, "Xianxia, what are you doing pretending at a time like this? Quickly get the fuck over here and hand over my flaming peacock fan." "Your flaming peacock fan? On what basis should he hand it over to you?" Someone sneered bluntly and moved forward as well. "Exactly. A treasure like the flaming peacock fan is something that belongs to the person that seizes it. Thinking of coercing us to have it all for yourself? Have you asked our permission?" The genius experts of the Darxian and Darqian dynasty shouted out as well. "Motherfucker! Everyone who entered the primeval battlefield knows that the flaming peacock fan belongs to me. All of you are clearly feigning ignorance. Aren't all of you too shameless?" Xianxia was furious to the point he almost spat blood, and he gritted his teeth as he spoke. "Treasures are something that re-obtain by those with strength. Being unable to protect even a quasi-immortal artifact can only prove that you're too weak, and you're utterly not worthy of possessing the flaming peacock fan." "Exactly. Has anyone in the primeval battlefield not killed another to seize their treasures? Have you seen anyone return what they seized to its original owner?" Everyone naturally wouldn't watch idly by as Xianxia seized the flaming peacock fan. They immediately confronted him and shouted loudly, and no one was convinced of the other's strength. Even if Xianxia's group overwhelmed them in numbers, but none of them were afraid. There were so many experts all over the surroundings, and would any of them agree to allowing the flaming peacock fan to be pocketed by Xianxia? No matter how strong Xianxia was, he wouldn't be able to go against the huge amount of people here. Rumble. Right when everyone was engaged in a heated argument, a thunderclap suddenly resounded out in the sky. A sound that was filled with a dignified and destructive force shook the heavens and the earth, and it shocked everyone to the point their hearts went cold as they raised their heads to look into the sky successively. The dark clouds roiled as crimson-red lightning surged within it and transformed into a world of lightning. This tribulation cloud had always been silent since before, causing everyone to not pay much attention to it. Yet at this moment, an unexpected event occurred abruptly along with this thunderclap. The crimson-colored and brilliant arcs of lightning actually transformed into a thick bloody color, causing the numerous thick and large bolts of lightning that surged within the tribulation cloud to seem like wriggling pythons that were extremely astounding, and they tainted the entire heavens and earth red. Moreover, numerous human-shaped lightning actually floated out into appearance from within the crimson-red lightning bolts, and they formed a dense mass and seemed like the spirits of lightning. A variety of lightning weapons were held in the hands of every single one of them, and they emitted an extremely terrifying aura that caused one's heart to palpitate. Rumble. At this moment, lightning rumbled in the heavens and the earth as the scene in the surroundings changed indeterminately, while the spirit energy in the air turned chaotic. All the demon beasts in the surrounding 5,000 kilometers were terrified to the point of hiding within their lairs, and they trembled as they looked towards Xianxia's location in unison. "It has finally arrived when I'm confronted by powerful enemies?" Xianxia's clothes fluttered in the wind as strands of cold lights shot out explosively from his eyes. There was no fear nor excitement emanated from him, and there was only calm, as if he'd always expected the tribulation lightning would arrive at this moment. "Shit! The tribulation lightning is about to descend. Quickly! Annihilate him! Otherwise, the treasures in his possession will be completely obliterated by the tribulation lightning. Kill!" Everyone in the vicinity couldn't care about their disputes with each other any longer, and their expressions went grim as they made a move brazenly. Various magic treasures, martial techniques, and divine abilities blasted and sprayed out as if they were worthless, and they covered the heavens and the earth as they blasted towards Xianxia. In their hearts, Xianxia was a dead man, and there was no need for them to worry about any accidents occurring. What they were truly worried about was whether the treasures in Xianxia's possession would be obliterated by the heavenly tribulation. Swoosh! However, in the next moment, a scene that caused them to feel astonished occurred. Xianxia's figure flashed and actually shot out explosively to charge directly towards the tribulation clouds in the sky. Moreover, his speed was swift like teleportation, allowing him to already arrive beneath the tribulation clouds before all the attacks had arrived before him. Clang! A strand of a clear and melodious sword howl resounded out. Xianxia held the talisman armament in hand as he looked at the tribulation clouds that were right before him, and the vital energy in his body rumbled like a great river within his body. His entire body glowed as a divine wheel that was like a sun floated up into appearance behind him, and it surged with a powerful and brilliant crimson light that caused his imposing aura to instantly become vast and terrifying to the extreme. Wasn't this fellow heavily injured and on the brink of death? How can he be able to explode out with such a terrifying strength? Someone was astonished. A rebirth wheel. This fellow has actually condensed a rebirth wheel. If he directly made a move against us earlier, someone was astounded and seemed to have thought of some sort of terrifying consequence, and he couldn't help but shudder in fear. Shit! He has already condensed a rebirth wheel, and if his soul transforms and forms a soul core, it would be equivalent to completely advancing into the rebirth realm. He was already capable of slaughtering so many people before, so how terrifying would he be if he successfully overcomes the tribulation? Some people were anxious and uneasy as they cried out in alarm. Everyone, let's make a move together. We must not allow him to overcome the tribulation successfully, as it would be a calamity to all of us. Someone shouted out explosively and won the agreement of everyone present. Everyone instantly made a move once again, and they even exerted all their strengths. They'd already made up their minds that even if they were unable to kill Xianxia, they would disturb Xianxia's progress in overcoming the tribulation. At that time, he would surely be struck to death by the tribulation lightning. For a time, numerous brilliant lights appeared once more in the sky. They were either formidable martial techniques that charged into the sky while the sound of the Tao rumbled, profound magic treasures that emitted divine rays of light that filled the heavens and the earth, or terrifying divine abilities that crushed space itself as they charged towards Xianxia. These few hundred people attacked in unison, and the impetus caused by this was even on the verge of covering over the tribulation clouds in the sky. It was vast like an explosive torrent of water, and it simply destroyed the heavens and the earth and crushed everything in its path. Overcoming the tribulation while in battle. My path has never changed. Amidst his muttering, Xianxia drew his sword and slashed towards the sky, causing vast and peerless sword insight to directly slash into the tribulation cloud that surged with blood-red colored lightning. Rumble! An enormous bang that shook the heavens resounded out. The tribulation clouds seemed to have been enraged by Xianxia's actions and split open with a bang before the blood-red bolts of lightning that were thick and large like pythons within it poured down like a rainstorm. These blood-red colored bolts of lightning emitted a destructive force that contained the will of the heaven Tao, and they poured down in a dense mass that didn't just envelop Xianxia but even drown the magic treasures, martial techniques, and divine abilities that were struck out by everyone. After staying silent for half a month, the tribulation lightning of the rebirth realm had finally erupted. The tribulation lightning suddenly sent down countless blood-red lightning bolts that poured down heavily as if the end of the world had arrived. This was the true might of the heavens, the punishment of the heavens, and it represented the supreme might of the laws of the heavens and the earth. It emitted a terrifying destructive force that caused everything that lived in this expanse of heavens and earth to be terrified and uneasy. In merely an instant, this area had transformed into a world of lightning that was crimson red like blood, and lightning shook the 9 heavens. It was even possible to notice that the blood-red bolts of lightning that were thick and large like chains had transformed into a variety of weapons. There were blades and spears clanging as they collided with each other and war drums resounding. And it was even possible to see that the lightning had condensed into numerous lightning spirits that seemed to be in the shape of humans. All of them held shining spears and sat on armored horses as they whistled through the sky while thunderbolts surged and shook the world. Rumble! Thunderclaps roared furiously as bolts of lightning rumbled, and all the attacks and magic treasures struck out by everyone in the surroundings were shattered and obliterated. And it shocked all of them to the point of retreating repeatedly while turning pale, as they were deeply afraid of being affected by the tribulation. On the other hand, Xianxia had suffered the blast of the tribulation lightning as well. An enormous bolt of lightning transformed into a pike that appeared above Xianxia as its lethality shot out explosively in all directions, and it intended to destroy all existences that went against its heavenly might. Swoosh! Right at this moment, Xianxia's entire body glowed crimson as the talisman armament soared through the sky, and he slashed out with his sword. Vast sword insight swept through the world and directly shattered this blood-colored lightning pike. Even though the blood-colored lightning pike was destroyed, the trace of will of the heaven Tao contained within it struck into Xianxia's sea of consciousness instead, and it struck down to the point waves rose up from all directions and shot into the sky in his sea of consciousness. The will of the heaven Tao was formed from the laws of the heaven Tao, and its lethality was extremely terrifying. Once a cultivator was unable to resist it, their sea of consciousness would be completely destroyed and their soul obliterated. Conversely, if one's soul endured the will of the heaven Tao, it would bring forth the effect of tempering the soul, and it would strengthen the soul and cause it to become even purer before transforming and producing a soul core in the end. But the tribulation lightning Xianxia drew was truly too terrifying. When he just shattered the blood-colored pike, there were a few hundreds of blood-colored weapons that smashed down once more, and they directly drowned the vast sword strike he slashed out, causing it to be completely shattered and have utterly no room to resist. Everyone present felt delighted and regretful in their hearts when they saw this scene. They were delighted that Xianxia would be annihilated by the tribulation lightning in the next moment, whereas they felt regretful because if Xianxia died, then the treasures in his possession would surely be destroyed along with him, and they wouldn't be able to obtain these treasures. Rumble. It was indeed as everyone had expected. After the sword Qi was dealt with, the weapons formed from the blood-red lightning directly blasted onto Xianxia, causing countless arcs of lightning to splash out. However, before everyone had the time to be happy, everything that happened in the next instant caused all their pupils to constrict abruptly. Not only did Xianxia survive, he'd forcefully endured the strikes of the lightning instead, and he was charging towards them. Moreover, Xianxia's speed was extremely swift. In the next moment, Xianxia's figure had already charged to the ground, and the crowd of people that were the closest to him were caught off guard, causing them to be directly enveloped by the surging lightning. They emitted a wave of shrill and miserable cries as they transformed into dust and perished. Most of these lightning bolts charged towards Xianxia with the intention of annihilating him. However, the aftershock was still sufficient to cause the other cultivators to be blasted apart, and especially when being caught off guard, the lethality that came from the punishment of the heavens was simply all-powerful and instantly annihilated over 10 lives. Shit! This fellow intends to use the might of the heavenly tribulation to annihilate us. He's too insane. This fellow has no regard for his life and actually wants to take us down with him. Retreat! Retreat quickly! Everyone was astounded as they roared furiously in unison before turning around and flashing towards the distance. The speed of their actions simply seemed as if they wished for nothing more than to be born with another pair of legs. This couldn't be helped. The heavenly tribulation was too terrifying, and they didn't want to perish along with this madman, Xianxia. In the blink of an eye, all the nearby experts flashed to the distance and moved away from this area that was filled with tribulation lightning, and they vanished completely. However, they didn't leave completely, but hid in the distance while intending to wait for an opportunity to take action. It was impossible for them to willingly leave until they saw Xianxia being completely annihilated. Everyone that overcame a tribulation would be extremely careful and even invite the seniors of their sex to stand guard. Yet not only had this fellow drawn over the heavenly tribulation while in battle, he even used the heavenly tribulation to kill others. How could such a heaven-defying action not shock everyone? Especially the scene that occurred earlier. It allowed them to understand Xianxia's strength a step further, and it caused them to even more urgently want to kill Xianxia. All of this made it impossible for them to leave just like this. Rumble. Xianxia originally intended to pursue them, but the blood-colored lightning was too ferocious, and it struck down onto him like a rainstorm, so even if he just condensed a rebirth wheel, it was slightly strenuous for him when encountering tribulation lightning like this. But Xianxia was already rather satisfied from being able to rely on the might of the heavenly tribulation to annihilate over 10 people, and he turned around right away to start resisting the tribulation lightning with all his strength. The talisman armament danced about in the sky like a silver river that flowed up. Within it, the sun and moon alternated, the 5 elements circulated, and various Tao insight phenomena were developed. The piercingly cold and blazing sword light crisscrossed as it shattered countless blood-red lightning weapons in succession, and only the will of the heaven Tao blasted successively into Xianxi's sea of consciousness. But how formidable was Xianxi's soul at this moment? It was comparable to a nether transformation realm expert, so resisting this level of attack was no different than eating or drinking, and he wasn't injured in the slightest. Conversely, the strength of his soul became even more refined and pure, and it faintly gave out a full feeling like a seed that was about to break out from beneath the ground. This fellow is too formidable. That level of tribulation lightning seems to be utterly incapable of doing anything to him. Humph! This is still the first wave of the tribulation lightning, and the tribulation lightning will only get stronger and stronger. Moreover, overcoming this tribulation would surely cause him to expend a great amount of true essence, causing him to become extremely weak. We'll make a move together at that time, and killing him would be as easy as a flip of the hand. Indeed, there are normally 3 waves of tribulation lightning. When ordinary people go against the final wave, it would usually form into various lightning weapons that were extremely shocking. On the other hand, this fellow had already encountered such a terrifying tribulation lightning in the first wave, and the following waves would surely be even more formidable and terrifying. Perhaps there would utterly be no need for us to make a move, and he would be struck to death. No matter what, we'll act according to circumstances. We must not allow him to survive again. In the distance, the genius experts of the various dynasties were gathered together and were communicating swiftly. The gazes they shot at Xianxia revealed boundless hatred, and they seemed to wish for nothing more than for him to be instantly annihilated and vanish eternally from their sight. Rumble! The tribulation clouds shook and roiled as blood-colored lightning surged and roared while tainting the heavens and the earth red. The second wave of the tribulation lightning descended, and there were a dense mass of human-shaped lightning that held lightning weapons and formed a vast and mighty army that charged like an explosive stream towards Xianxia. Kill! 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 It was even to the extent that the rumbling of war drums and battle cries faintly sounded out from within the lightning, and it shook the heavens and earth while causing the world to become overcast. The scalps of the distant spectators went numb when they saw this, and they asked themselves in their hearts, if they encountered such a tribulation lightning in their tribulation, then not to mention overcoming it safely, they would probably be instantly crushed and perish. Bang! 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 The human-shaped lightning charged down like a huge cavalry that crushed the space before them and emitted a terrifying, imposing aura of invincibility and the intention to flatten the heavens and the earth, causing the feeling of despair to arise in others. Under these circumstances, Xianxia felt pressured for the first time, and he was unable to kill all of them while circulating the myriad convergence sword scripture with his entire strength, causing him to be directly struck by countless human-shaped bolts of lightning. These terrifying bolts of lightning directly exploded as soon as they came in contact with his body, and there were even countless strands of lightning that entered his body and rampaged about while carrying out destruction within him. Instantly, 30% of Xianxi's body was destroyed. If it wasn't for him having attained the rebirth gold body earlier, this strike would probably have been sufficient to completely crush his body into powder. But it was precisely because he'd attained the rebirth gold body that shaman energy ceaselessly emerged from within his body to repair the destroyed parts of his body in unison, and his body was completely recovered to its peak state in the time of almost a breath. Seizing this opportunity, Xianxia slashed out with his entire strength, causing sword chi to shoot out like the tide, and it shattered and collapsed wave after wave of human-shaped lightning. At the same time, the will of the heaven Tao that seemed to cover the heavens and the earth surged into his sea of consciousness with a bang. It was as if he'd consumed a great tonic, causing Xianxia to feel that his spirit, essence, and energy was unprecedentedly refreshed, and the strength of his soul was almost climbing like a rocket that didn't stop in the slightest. The feeling that his soul was expanding and about to break out from its shell felt even stronger, and this was the sign of being about to transform and produce a soul core. Good again! Xianxia raised his sword towards the sky. At the same time, numerous sky jade liquid pills were being burned fiercely within his body. and they were swiftly transformed into vast warm flows that replenished the consumed true essence in his body. In practically an instant, he'd consumed a few thousand sky jade liquid pills. Actually, this was normal, as after he advanced to the rebirth realm, the stronger his strength was, the higher his consumption of true essence would be. If he didn't possess the assistance of spirit pills, it would be impossible for him to persist until now. The tribulation clouds seemed to have been infuriated, causing the human-shaped lightning from the second wave of the heavenly tribulation to drum their war drums and ride lightning dragon horses while wearing lightning armor, and they were like an even purer army of lightning that were born from the thunderstorm. They charged out from space while holding weapons on armored horses, and their imposing aura shot into the sky like a rainbow. But with the rebirth gold body to rely on, even though Xianxia's body suffered heavy injuries repeatedly, it was able to recover instantly, and he'd seized this opportunity to shatter countless more bolts of lightning. In next to no time, the second wave of the tribulation lightning had vanished. Xianxia's soul became even more condensed, causing the space between his brows to bulge up and emit a rhythmic thump that was like the beat of a heart, and his soul core was soon to be formed. What a freak! Even human-shaped lightning bolts are incapable of doing anything to him. Don't be impatient. There's still the third wave of tribulation lightning after this, and that's the final wave. Most cultivators that charge into the rebirth realm die in the final wave of the tribulation lightning. But for the sake of being prepared for the worst, everyone should still make preparations. Even if he really overcomes the tribulation successfully, he'll surely be the weakest at that time, and will move out together to annihilate him. When they saw Xianxia easily overcome the second wave of the tribulation lightning, all the people in the distance were terrified and felt a chill run down their spines as their expressions became heavier and heavier. They'd already planned everything and would kill Xianxia today, no matter what,